Good evening. It is 7 p.m. and I would like to call the special meeting and public hearing of the Stratford Inland Wetlands Commission to order. Tonight's agenda is a public hearing for the construction of a 110,000 square foot, 129 unit residential apartment complex with 2,500 square foot community building and associated parking and infrastructure, 99 Hawley Lane, Assessor's Map reference 20.16, Block 4, Lot 1. Applicant Mountain Development Corp. Is the applicant or his representatives present? Also, before we start, anyone wishing to speak at the public comment portion of this meeting can sign up at a sign-up sheet to my left on a table over here if you haven't done so already.
Sorry for the squeaks. Well set. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Raymond Rizzio. Just hold on, let's try and dry out for a second.
How's the water?
I'm an attorney with the firm of Russo and Rizzio. We're located at 10 Sasko Hill Road in Fairfield, Connecticut. I'm happy to be before you tonight with regard to this project at 99 Hawley Lane. We're here for a permit. I also have George Logan, our environmental and wetlands specialist, and Manny De Silva that will take you through the engineering of our project. I guess we're going to find a more appropriate night for a wetlands hearing, and glad we made it here. But this project, this is a long evolving project. This was originally designed to be a campus office park. Years ago, there was office building here, another 110,000 square foot office building near where we want to put the, right in the same exact location where we want to put the apartments. The Planning and Zoning Commission has been promoting mixed use. Their zoning regulations were amended, maybe last year, end of last year, beginning of this year, to allow for a mixed use and a residential component in a campus office park to kind of bring in that live-work kind of environment that you've all noticed and become familiar with as we get through, as we encountered all the challenges that we had through COVID. Our client has owned this property for years. They have tried to develop this in the most sensitive manner, in a manner that caused the least amount of disturbance, in a manner that would be the least intrusive to any of the residents. The property is unique. It's about 36 acres. 8 of the acres, 8 or 9 of the acres are here between the office building, the twin towers here, and a parking garage. The other dry area, so the 36 acres, this is 8. There remained about 8 or 9, it remains about 26 acres that have been left undeveloped. Our client proposes to still leave about 19 acres undisturbed, which is tremendous in this environment. So as you can see, what we tried to do is, I have an old picture, and we'll take you through some of this. Let me see if I can show you where the old office building was. Pretty far down, right, Chris? I'm going to have to turn over to the engineers and environmentalists. So you had an office building that was previously approved years ago, and this was going to be just a general campus office park. You know, the world changed. You folks probably can't remember the last time you actually had somebody building an office building in town, and we are now left with this, which was fully approved, 110,000 square feet that was here. As you can see, it basically is in the same area that our project, the proposed project is, except we tried to do is, so we limited the blasting. There's a bit large outcropping of rock here. We moved it, shifted basically everything to the west so that it doesn't impact the neighbors and still provide, as I said, 19 acres. It's about 10 acres of wetlands and then still another 9 acres of upland that will not be disturbed. One thing that's important to note in this application, there is no filling of wetlands, no crossing of wetlands, no permanent or temporary disturbance of wetlands. So this property, like I said, this project, when you take into the totality impact on the wetlands, you'll hear from is actually a pretty benign application as relates to wetlands. So many people may have questions about traffic, they may have questions about special services, but as relates to wetlands, we are before you because we're in a watershed area. In a watershed area, there's a 250-foot regulated area. So as you can see, our wetland line limitation, about 9 acres, we do not touch or disturb any wetlands. There is an existing drainage, what they call plunge pool here, which handles all of the impervious parking area and handles that has currently already been approved, constructed, and stays there. It will continue to handle the impervious, rain flow there. We will be proposing an additional plunge pool to take care of the roof, which will be even farther from the already approved and existing plunge pool. So this will be, the building will be about 110,000 square feet. There will be a pool. There'll be about 2,500 square foot community room that we plan on having here, and a pool. The balance of this parking lot already exists. We'll be wrapping the parking basically facing the rear of the big Y. There will still not have to do the blasting that would have had to be done on the previous approved application because we've tucked the parking closer to the building. And basically we're here to allow us to put some of for some grading within the regulated area and to put some drainage detention basins within the regulated area, but no closer to the regulated area, no closer to the wetlands area than currently exists. I have Manny Da Silva here with me tonight. Manny, if you can take us through the engineering portion and explain. You want to come up now? Steve, you want to come up? Steve, you can come up, introduce yourself, and I'm also going to hand out, there's been some revised plans to address some of the comments. If I can hand, you guys can ask questions. Steve, can you throw anything, let me know.
Okay, all right. Hi, my name is Steve Santacruz. I'm representing Rose T-Zone Company. I'm a certified professional engineer in the state of Connecticut, and I'm just going to go into a little more detail of the engineering that was associated with the development. I think you could you just turn let's see, to SB1 here. Go back one. So just to expand on what Ray was going through, we added a limit of development line just so you could more clearly see that we're not going into the wetlands at all. We're not disturbing the wetlands area, and we're actually about 25 feet from the wetlands, and then at the nearest point.
At the nearest point of non-disturbance.
Of non-disturbance, correct. Just turning to the grading plan, and this just shows that disturbance area to the south of the building, where we're grading to. And as Ray said, we're going to be tying into an existing detention basin to the east, or to the western side of the building. That's going to take a portion of the proposed impervious area. This parking area to the west will be conveyed into a proposed underground detention system, and that will spill out into the existing detention basin. And these systems have been designed to reduce the runoff from the existing condition. To the east of the building, there's also a proposed detention basin that will be, stormwater will be conveyed to, yep, just right there. And like I said, all of this has been designed to improve the stormwater quality coming from the proposed paved area and also reduce the runoff volume on site. So now we're going to take a look at the sediment and erosion control plan. So we have silt fences to protect the wetlands, to capture any sediment from construction. And we also propose a silt fence to capture the entire construction area. As we might get into a bit later, that will also serve to protect the endangered species that may be located on site. We also have proposed anti-tracking pad and silt sacks in the catch basins, and these are all to protect the wetlands from any construction activities.
So we're talking about that anti-tracking pad, although it's not really a wetlands issue. One of the things that have been proposed in discussing with staff is there'll be an alternate outlet. If you might not realize that, but Armory Road runs all the way to the back of this property, so that for traffic purposes, even though I'm sure you'll hear a lot of comments about traffic, even though I know we've got nothing to do with wetlands, I would just want to let the commission know that we've also considered and talked with staff about connecting to Armory Road to provide an additional outlet. None of that will have any impact on the wetlands, but I just thought the commission was wondering how people are going to circulate to get out of there. That will be added into the plan.
Okay, next we have our utility plan. I'll just briefly run through that. We're proposing to connect to existing utilities on site as much as possible. We have our gas and water connections connecting to existing mains on site. Sanitary sewer will connect to sewer manhole in Armory Road. And now we can turn to the landscape plan. There's a couple comments to add in more native plantings, which we attempted to address with this latest plan. And we also added some more plantings to the south of the development along the bottom of the graded slope.
We'll be adding more planting and trees along the area inside the non-disturbance area. So this will all be a non-disturbance line, planting mature native plants and mature trees to that area. All once again outside the wetlands. The closest portion where there's some grading is probably about 26 to 27 feet, and that's just to provide a gentle slope rather than to put large retaining walls. We're under the impression, dealing with staff, that large retaining walls are not something the town is looking forward to, so we've tried to create a gentle, impervious transition from the apartment building down to the regulated, through the regulated area. That'll all be lawn, correct?
Correct. Now we're going to turn to just look at some of the site details, the lighting plan as well. So we had a lighting plan prepared, and the main point I would take away from this plan is that there's going to be no added light to the wetlands areas. And that's all been calculated by the lighting design specialist. We have some sediment and erosion control details, silt fences, anti-tracking pad, diversion, berm, and swales. We have some pavement details and concrete sidewalk details here, and some sign details. It's pretty standard details for catch basins, storm manhole. We have our plunge pool detail, and typical utility trench details. These are some more utility details as well as the detail for the...
Excuse me.
Yep.
Can you speak into the microphone a little bit more? It's
Sorry.
hard to hear you.
Okay, sorry. Yep. Got it. Okay.
Then we also had an alternative plan that we had looked at, which would be splitting the buildings up. The same issue that you had with regard to the previous approved plan is as you split the buildings up, you create more impervious, and then you also push the buildings, even though you're about the same distance from the wetlands, you push everything neighboring residential properties, and additionally, what you do is you require the blasting of this heavy ledge over here. So what we've tried to do is leave the ledge in place, creates a very effective boundary between the residents and the neighbors, and really the only people that will probably see this will be from the back of the Big Y shopping center. Everything else is tucked way back. As I said, you're going to have, what I'm talking about, 9 acres. You have 10 acres of wetlands and 9 acres of upland that will remain undisturbed out of this 26-acre parcel. That's remaining. And as I said, there is the office building that had been proposed back, I believe that was proposed back in '99. And, you know, but for the change of circumstances, this is what would be there today. If there's any technical questions for engineer who's here, I'll also continue, if you'd like me to, with our environmental specialist, George.
Of course. Whoops. Here we go. So, nice to be before you again. It's been a while. George Logan, for the record, Principal Environmental Scientist with REMA Ecological Services, and we were involved in doing a couple of things. The first thing that we did is do our wetland delineations. For that, you have to be a registered soil scientist, which I am. I also hold a master's degree in natural resources science and conservation biology. So by training and by education, I'm a wildlife biologist. But because my wife wanted to live in Connecticut, I had to get other certifications as a soil scientist. I'm also a professional wetland scientist and also a certified senior ecologist through Ecological Society of America. And I've been working in this field now for, I just looked today, 34 years. So, wow, any rate. So, first order of business, as always, is for us to delineate the wetlands. There's a separate report, so there's two reports that I've provided. The larger report is a wetland assessment that just came in Friday. Prior to that, there was a standalone report, which was called an on-site soil investigation wetland delineation report. And what it basically tells you is we spent some time back in 2020 and then in 2021 delineating the wetlands. So we had gathered a little bit of baseline information at that time, but for the most part, the baseline information was done in two different dates. One, I always like to look at a site when there are no leaves, as close as possible to the application. So that happened in January. And you can see from the report, there's some pictures that show you from where the development is going to be looking down to the wetland. And then I returned in June. In June, I think it was 11th. And the reason for that was June is just about the best time to look at wetlands, generally speaking, especially when you're potentially dealing with listed species. So a little sidetrack here, and I'll talk more about the potential for eastern box turtles on this site, but you probably have heard this before, that June is the best month to look for them. So I'll return to that. So, again, baseline in June, and so if you look at a report, in the back of the report, there's a form. It's just sort of a tickable form that we give, and gives you a rundown of some characterization, inventory, classification of the wetland and sort of the dominant species. Now, the question that I usually get is, how much of this large wetland did you actually look at? Plenty. I mean, when we did the wetland delineations, obviously we looked at the wetland from all directions. In January, I concentrated more on looking sort of the northwestern portion of the wetland, which is a little different. And that portion of the wetland has sort of a seasonally saturated to seasonally flooded regime, and it's associated also with a discharge from an existing detention basin. And I was interested to see if there was going to be any telltale signs of any impacts from that basin. So I kind of went into the wetland, probably about 75 feet. I remember putting my auger down and I buried it, which tells you that the wetland is predominantly, especially once you get into the more flatter portion, is dominated by organics. And it's at least 4 feet, but it's probably a lot more than that in the center. And probably at the center, once you get under the organics, you're going to have a nice little deposit of stratified drift, which is usually the case in these situations. And underneath, you have a liner of bedrock. That's what our glaciers did back when. So the wetland, as you have heard, is fairly large. It's more or less isolated in a sense, and I'll explain that. It's about over 10 acres, about 10.6 if you include a few off-site areas. It does have an outlet. An outlet was placed many, many years ago, and there's a concrete outlet at Johnson Drive? Yes. And then it goes, a stream forms at that point. Actually, a stream forms right before it. And then heads down towards Veterans Park and those extensive wetlands that are there. When you look at the wetland, and I have some aerial photographs that are pretty instructive, what I did is I focused in the wetland itself, and then I started looking out, because one of the important things that you have to look at when you're assessing the functions and values of a wetland is to look at it in its landscape context. It does have a watershed. The watershed is about 64 acres at that outlet at Johnson Street or Road. According to the USGS stream stats, the watershed is 78.1% developed. So this is an urbanized watershed. And this is based on data that's probably about 10 years old. It also tells you that the impervious surfaces within that developed area that contribute to this wetland are 34.8%. It's pretty high. That's pretty high. Usually when you see that kind of impervious surface, you know there's going to be an impact. Or at least you think there's going to be an impact. But here's the interesting part of this. This wetland is resilient. So when I look at this wetland, even though that I know that I have a direct discharge of unmitigated, non-polished water that's coming off the neighborhood, which is to the east, which is basically most of the 78.1% of urbanization. And this is a moderate to high density subdivision. So it's not large lots. Many lots are a quarter acre. Some are a little larger than that. This wetland there's a spur. If you look at the wetland, there's a spur that comes this way. And that's dominated by till soil. So these are very poorly drained soils. Some bedrock influence obviously there. But there's just basically a stream. There's a discharge from the neighborhood there, and there's probably another one, but that's the major one. So when I looked at that, I'm like, oh, boy, this poor wetland is suffering. But when you look at it, what surprises me is it's not as bad as I think. And the reason is it's large, it's resilient. So the impacts are at the outer edges, if you will. Once you get into the center, the only thing that you will notice that has changed over the decades with this wetland, which is kind of the thing that we see all over Connecticut, and that has to do with discharge, is the proliferation of common reed, Phragmites, which is an invasive. And I have a picture in there that shows you the stands. But because this is a very wet wetland, in the emergent portion, so there's 3 vegetative components to this, at least. Around the edge, especially in the north, you have a sort of a forested edge, and you know your typical red maple swamp component. Once you start getting from our development sites, say, get into the wetland, you start moving more to the south, and you get into these organic soils, which are saturated all the time, obviously, and they're also seasonally flooded, temporarily flooded also, depending on what's going on in the watershed. Your dominant species is buttonbush. Buttonbush is your only one of 2 true aquatic shrubs in Connecticut. They like their feet wet all the time. So that's what you have. You have a buttonbush, and then you have some, you have maleberry, and you have some willows and whatnot. And then that transitions into this pretty nice looking emergent wetland. So this is sort of a marsh/meadow, mostly a marsh.
George, can I help you? And I'll bring this over closer. If you could kind of take the commission through that tour that you just talked about, but kind of point, we say north, south, east, west.
So
at least
north is usually up unless the engineer messes up, right? But they didn't mess up here. So north is up. The first zone that I'm talking about is probably from here to there. The second zone with the scrub shrub
and that's the first zone is
is a forested wetland. But it's not a very wide zone. It's probably anywhere from 20 feet to 40 feet. It's about it. And in some areas a little more, particularly in the northwest corner where you have more of a sloping wetland. And then you transition into this shrub scrub, which is probably, I'd say, about a third of the entire wetland. And it starts here and it goes to about there, generally speaking. And the rest of it is emergent. And you can see that in the aerial photographs. So in this report, as I said, I have something that tells you what the dominant species are. So I come back to what I said. How much of this wetland did you look at? Probably not much, but just enough. I really didn't go into the organic swamp more than maybe 40 feet. And then I'm like, okay, I'm sinking. I'm going to turn back. It gets very, very dense, which also tells you that the center is resilient and it's not as sensitive. The outer portions of this wetland are more sensitive than the middle of it because it's sort of protected. The wetland protects itself in a sense. So you have to think about the sensitivity of the wetland also has to do with its size, and that factors into the functions and value analysis. So I predominantly focused on the area that's within several hundred feet of what we're proposing, what is being proposed. I did go around the eastern edge and I went as far as there's a little prominent knoll somewhere about here. And so I went just past that because I wanted to see the Phragmites patches, and you'll see the pictures in there. But I didn't really venture to the middle. I know I'll probably pay for that because a lot of people will say, well, you didn't look at the entire wetland. But what's important here is that I looked at enough of the wetland that's important as far as potential impacts. And we're talking here indirect impacts also. All right, so this is a groundwater depression wetland. As I said, it's seasonally flooded, seasonally saturated, and temporarily flooded. So it has quite an amplitude of water there, especially because of the fact that you have a lot of impervious surface that's discharging to it. So when you have large storms, the level obviously will rise. Now, when it comes to functions and values, which is not surprising, this is a section of the report there, that's section 2.4. Apparently, I have two sections 2.4. My bad. I just noticed that. You always notice something. You see the typical table, and this is based on professional judgment, experience, having seen hundreds of wetlands over my career. So you get a sense after a while of what are highly functioning wetlands and which are not. And you can see this is a highly functioning wetland. No one's going to deny that. So utilizing the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers descriptive method, which is sort of the method, functions and value method that we use in Connecticut, and you can go deep into that. Again, I just sort of use a lot of professional judgment here. Obviously, we have groundwater discharge, the principal function. No one's going to deny that. Flood flow alteration, absolutely. That's a principal function. Then you have sediment toxic and pathogen retention. You're like, why? Why is that? Well, because this particular wetland is very efficient in cleaning water. And also there's an opportunity for it to clean water because you have a significant residential subdivision with very little attenuation that's discharging into it. Same thing goes for nutrient removal transformation. Production export, yes, of course. There's a lot of material, just not only by the fact that things decay and then they're discharged and become part of the food chain, if you will, further down, but also the fact there's a lot of animal movement. So there's production export by animals moving back and forth, which you would expect. Aquatic habitat, no, not so much. Wildlife habitat, obviously that's a principal function. I'm sure that if I went and spent a significant time out there, even though this area is surrounded by development, because it's large and because internally, the internal portion of it is far enough away from development, you know, hundreds of feet, that you will have a significant amount of species that one could find there. And then I said endangered species habitat, principal potential, and I'll talk about that in a moment. One could argue that this is unique, so the uniqueness heritage, I said yes, it is unique, but I didn't put it as a principal function. I could be corrected there because this is sort of a unique situation, a unique wetland. So as far as Connecticut listed species, so we have a letter from DEP. We have to do it because it's probably a good idea, and there's also a little estimated habitat on all kinds of maps that say, there's something there. And so what I wanted to do is I did two things in order to kind of figure that out a little bit. One, I gave you the, from Connecticut Environmental Conditions Online, figure number 5, which is this one. Oh, you didn't get it in color. I'm going to have to give you folks color, unless you can look at it on your computers. This is telling. This tells you what the landscape context of this is, and you have to keep that in the middle of when you're looking at even this listed species situation. So this habitat has pretty much become isolated and fragmented. Now, if you look at figure number, the next one, number 6, I gave you the blobs, if we call them, the estimated habitats that you find in the NDDB. So you see these hatched areas. And there's 2 estimated habitats that are kind of joined together, and that's it. And you look at one of them and you say, well, wait a minute. They got one in the middle of the subdivision. Why is that? How could there be turtles there? Wouldn't the turtles be down here in this undisturbed habitat? Well, the reason for that is because this is a historic occurrence. So a long time ago, there was probably a thriving population of box turtles in this area. Now, can I say for certainty that there are no box turtles remaining here? I can't say that. There'll probably be some. As you know, turtles are long-lived. They will live, well, some estimate 50 years to 100 years. Some. No, I've never found an octogenarian yet. I've found 40s. So they can hang out, but the problem is if you're taking away their habitat, if you're fragmenting their habitat, even though they can live long and persist, they can have a successful reproductive population. So that's probably either blinked or is blinking away. That doesn't mean we don't care. We do. But also doesn't mean that this is the purview of the Wetlands Commission, because it ain't. You do not regulate wildlife, you regulate the habitat, the wetland habitat. So that's your nexus. So anyhow, as far as that's concerned, what the letter does from the DEP, there's some recommendations. So what the DEP has done for species of special concern like spotted turtle, like eastern box turtle, for hognose snake and things like that, is they don't say you can't develop. What they have is they've produced a protocol of recommendations. Some of them have time restrictions and some of them don't, and I'll explain how that goes. The time restrictions is, ideally, you don't want to be disturbing the ground when they're hibernating, because, you know, they can't get out of harm's way, and that's the end of that. Or, if you're doing it during the during the active season, then there's certain protocols you can follow. But there's a flip side. The flip side is if you have a site where you can put some bodies out there, you can isolate the site, sanitize it, so to speak, and come in and find the turtles and put them out of harm's way, that negates your time restriction. But you have to do a good job of doing that. So, and I've seen the DEP being okay with that. It depends on the site. So it all depends on the site. All right, so now what I'd like to talk about is, okay, now that I've talked about the wetland a little bit, characterized it, tell you what's there, or what could be there, what is this development going to do to it? How's it going to affect functions and values? But more importantly, how's it going to affect physical characteristics of the wetland? Because, and I hate to be acting like a lawyer, because I'm not, but I've been involved with several cases that have made law in Connecticut. One was from this town, Avalonbay. You might remember that. Also Avalonbay versus Conservation Commission, Wilton. River Bend down in Old Saybrook, the preserve. And what that has done in the law is told us from case law that we only care about physical impacts. You can't regulate wildlife. You have to regulate physical impacts to the wetlands. So one is obvious. You fill the wetland, that's a physical impact. If you alter the hydrology of a wetland, that's a physical impact. If during construction you allow for sediment to go into it and have an impact, that's a physical impact. If you do not clean your water sufficiently, post-construction, if you don't have a robust stormwater management system and water gets into it and has a physical impact, that's a physical impact. So what I've done in my report is I've gone through these categories, short-term, long-term, and without going into any great extent, I can tell you there's no direct physical impact, there's no filling of wetlands, there's no alteration of hydrology. We're in the watershed and we're not taking water from one place and putting it to another. It's going to still function the same way. I trust these guys. I've looked at their system. They've done a great job following the 2004 Stormwater Quality Manual, DEP, with its most recent amendments. And so the water is going to be cleaned substantially so that it doesn't have a physical impact on the wetlands. And that's kind of where I stand. So once I see all that, I can say that in my professional opinion, there's no significant adverse impact to this wetland. Now, I did make a couple of recommendations. You might have not seen those.
We'd like to make your recommendations.
Okay.
We request the commission to adopt them as conditions should they see fit to approve this act.
All right. I'm glad that you saw them. I wasn't sure because we were all rushing to get this, or I was rushing to get this report out. So we have a significant amount of earthwork that's going to happen there. And a lot of it is not just earthwork. It's basically taking out bedrock and redistributing it throughout the site so that you can have a flat area to build. So that's going to take a while. And what happens very often when you do that, there's fine stuff that gets generated, stone dust, and also you have some soils here that are going to be disturbed. So under the current plan, which is the typical standard thing that works well, is you have a silt fence backed up by hay bales. And what I've recommended for most of the area facing the wetland is to use also a wood chip berm or wood materials filter berm. Depends on if you use the Connecticut DOT standard regulation. So DOT did some experiments more than a decade ago and came up with the fact that if you use a wood materials filter berm, which is usually wood chips, and it has a standard, it's 3 or 4 feet in the bottom, it's 2 feet at the top, it's, at least 2.5 feet tall or something like that. They found out that it does better than the combination of silt fence and hay bales. More than twice as good. It even, to extent, takes out the colloidal fraction of sediment. Just about nothing can take that out. And then once that is done, you can just kind of push it around and it becomes part of your landscape. I've specifically used this several times in projects where there was a potentially sensitive wetland, and it's worked well. And I cited one area, which is the nearest one, which is the Fairchild Magnet High School that was done, well, it depends on how you see it. It was done in Trumbull, but then they took that land and put it in Bridgeport, which is an interesting thing, right? the only time that the legislature, both Democrats and the Republicans, agreed on anything in this state. So it's actually in Bridgeport, but it was originally in Trumbull. And we used those wood chip berms, and they worked like magic.
Was your recommendation, to just make it clear for the commission, that the wood chip berm would be in addition to the hay bale and
No, you can use silt fence and then the wood chip berm.
silt fence and wood chip berm?
Right, so that's the combination. And then on the west side, where the existing parking lot is, which is going to be regraded, I don't have a concern about that area, so you wouldn't have to do that there. That's number one recommendation. The second recommendation, which is in my section of section 4, is what I call an invasive plant control plan to be formulated particularly for invasive shrubs. Japanese barberry is there. We have a little bit of glossy buckthorn. We have some horse honeysuckle and multiflora rose. So those are the main ones. And, you know, some garlic mustard, I guess, and a couple of other things too. And what I'm saying is this should be a 3-year post-construction program of control. So you don't do it during construction, you do post-construction. And it's basically at the remaining buffer. So from the wetland boundary up. And there's not a lot of invasives there now, so it's not going to be like a big deal. But anything that comes in usually comes in right at the edge, as you have more light. And there's already probably propagules and seed source of some of these bad actors in the soil, but once you get a little light there, poof, they sometimes will puff up. So you could do that. I don't think it's going to be a deal. And if necessary, and depending, I got to scrutinize your landscaping plan a little more. I didn't have time to do that because I don't want to overdo it. I think you already have some good things in there. Is, if necessary, put some additional shrubs at the edge. And the shrubs that I usually recommend are what we call clonal shrubs, and they're facultative, like sweet pepper bush. It's clonal. You put a few, and you know, within a few years, they're all over the place because they just start spreading. Bayberry is another one. Well, I wouldn't recommend that there. So that's something that I would recommend, and since this meeting will probably continue, if it doesn't continue, then I can work with staff and provide some, I mean, you probably want to have a little plan that says, this is the zone we're talking about, and this is the actual things that we're going to do during these 3 years. You know, and how we're going to eradicate them is well, I'll tell you how we eradicate them. Year one, after construction has finished, we come in and we physically remove. So this is mechanical removal. So you go through and you're like, okay, multiflora rose, cut it, out it goes. Don't use any chemicals. Second year, you do the same. Now, there might be some sprouts that come up, and usually what we do with those is we do use triclopyr, full strength, which is not glyphosate, which is bad news because that spreads. But triclopyr, experiments have shown that it doesn't go beyond the root system into the ground around it. And what you do is you see a little resprout, and you do the funnel. So you create a funnel, I'll give you the material, which is expandable. And what you do is you go over to the sprout, you put it right over, you spray right in, so it doesn't spray around. And then, of course, you have to have a bucket with you so you can put the funnel back in there because it's going to be dripping. Right, so you have to be careful with that. So I can't do that because I'm not licensed, but there are licensed people that can do that. And then third year, you might do a little bit of both. But you try to concentrate with mechanical removal as much as possible, which is obviously the best way to go. So those are the two recommendations. And I know I've gone through a lot, so if there are any questions now or later, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Yes, sir.
Okay, that's better. Okay. George, I have a copy of your map over here of the development site.
Okay.
So in red I have, you see this okay?
Oh, yes, I can see that.
So right here, this red area, this is the big Y, which, including Town Fair Tire. That's a big building. Over here is the proposed project. Okay, it's this area, and it seems that the impervious area that this project is going to create is going to be like bigger than the big Y. Just for reference, so everybody get an idea. Now, this area is a higher elevation than the wetland by 30, 40 feet.
Yep.
So what I don't understand, bear with me, but when you get all this rain, like if it rains for a couple days, we get a deluge. How is that water that's on a higher elevation not going to go downhill into where it's been going for thousands of years, into the wetland?
So this is above my pay grade, so defer to the engineer on that. I can tell you, but I'd rather have a professional engineer.
That's a little misleading on the big Y part of it. The amount of impervious that comes out of that big Y project goes all the way out to Holly Lane, and basically everything
Right.
all the way out, which is much more considerable.
Yes.
And considering the balance of the property disturbed there versus leaving 10 acres of wetlands and 9 acres of upland as a buffer. That's the actual building.
The yes.
The impervious goes all the way out to Holly Lane.
Yes, that building
So
owned,
there is
building
no,
owned.
the amount of disturbance on our property percentage-wise compared to what's being done, what was done in the Big Y project,
Yeah,
is the Big Y project multiple times
yeah,
the amount of disturbance and impervious.
right.
Now, I want to take our engineer through this, because you got to remember, I think he said something that's very important. All this water has been going to the same place. It'll continue to go to the same place, but it'll be controlled, cleaned, and filtered, so that it won't end up in a situation where you have, for example, coming out of the subdivisions, as he was explaining, all the people live in those neighborhoods, where you have uncontrolled water flow and you have unfiltered flow. And I have our engineer talk about the quality. So this project is not going to increase any off-site or any of the conditions with regard to the water. As the amount of water that goes in there, it's going to improve with the structures that they've designed. It's going to improve the quality of the water, which we hope will improve the quality of the wetlands. Manny De Silva from Rose Tizo, if you can explain how we're handling all this water.
Manny Silva from Rose Tizo, engineering principal, 35 Brentwood Avenue, Fairfield, Connecticut. So the site has been split up into 3 different drainage areas or 3 different control areas, right? So basically we have the existing parking lot here that's been constructed as a portion of that previous approval where we were going to have an office building but never built. So this area here is going to get caught in catch basins and then brought to a swirl concentrator where the water gets cleaned out. Basically, the sediment gets taken out to the bottom of the unit, and then any floatables like oils, bottles, things of that nature get caught in the top. And that gets collected in this underground gallery system, which is about 960 lineal feet for just this portion, this 1/3 of the site, right? So from basically this ridge line over that's paved will go into this underground storage facility where the water gets held in underground tanks and then infiltrated into the ground. So the water doesn't go into the wetland directly. Then there's a control structure here, which will then allow a little bit of water metered through an orifice hole at the bottom of it to kind of just leak out as some of the water is being infiltrated, some of it's being leaked out, and that'll come into this existing retention pond that's out here today. And as Mr. Logan was saying, the impacts from this to the wetlands from this existing retention pond are surprisingly very low, right? So that we're going to continue using that retention pond, and then that has another control structure here, which then also meters flow into the wetland itself, or not into the wetland, but upland area to the wetland. Then what we have is basically the roof water itself, which doesn't need to be cleaned because it's clean water. It just hits the roof and then goes into the roof leaders and down. That is coming into this plunge pool here, which then has a level spreader, and the level spreader is designed to have that length so that as the water flows over it, the water is trickling slow enough that it wouldn't erode a grass slope, right? So like if we just put a pipe discharge, a point discharge, that water will come out so fast that it'll start eroding away a bank and like create like kind of a gully, and that will just bring sediment into the wetland. So what we did is, in all of our discharges, we created these concrete level spreaders, which is the water will then spread out over a long length versus one point, and that will let the water just trickle down the grass slope, and it won't erode anything into the wetlands. If you can envision that a little bit, right?
So it's more like you're trying to recreate the natural environment.
Correct.
Flowing down.
Yeah, so the natural environment right now, the rain is falling onto the wooded area or into the grass area, and it's just spread out over this whole length, and it's coming into the wetland, and it's concentrating into this area. So we're trying to replicate that existing condition. And then from here over, we have this third area where this parking lot here is then coming into this new retention pond here, and again, we have a level spreader discharge here. And prior to this, we have also another hydrodynamic separator, and that's to kind of filter and clean the water so that the water before it goes into our retention ponds is clean water, so that you only have clean water coming into the ponds, and then from the ponds, they kind of discharge through those level spreaders, which is not going to be much water because the way they were designed for the 2-year storm, we're reducing the amount of water from the existing conditions. So right now, how it rained there today, the 2-year storm will be reduced by 15%, the 5-year storm will be reduced by 6%, the 25-year storm will be reduced by 4%, the 50-year storm will be reduced by 10.5%, and then we're reducing the 100-year storm by 7.2%. So basically, the amount of water that's falling there today will be less once we build this project. And the water quality, because right now these paved areas here from the existing parking lot, they discharge into the wetland, and they have no stormwater controls except for this retention pond. What we're going to do is add to our treatment train some secondary treatment implements and some primary treatment, which is, I consider primary treatment like the gallery system being infiltrated into the ground. That filters through the sand in the ground and into the wetland water table. So we have a treatment train. We have snouts in all of our catch basins to kind of help with the floatables in the actual catch basins so they don't get into our system. And then one thing that I wanted to talk about is the turtles. And we have some experience with this in town over on Lordship Boulevard about how we use, basically we put the DEP's procedure for dealing with the turtles right on the plan. And how we're going to do this is when we go out there, first thing we got to do is establish a perimeter silt fence so that we can separate from where the turtles would migrate onto the property and basically create a physical barrier so they don't come on while we're building anything. So what we do is we go with a biologist. They come in front of us as we're establishing that perimeter to sweep for any turtles and move them as there's any there. And that's when we create this silt fence barrier. We're showing silt fence with hay bales behind it. I think Mr. Logan is asking for a wood chip berm. I think it's similar, so it wouldn't be an issue. And as we create this exterior barrier, we then sweep the inside of it, right, with the biologist. Basically look for turtles inside and then relocate them outside if they're inside, right?
This is, to make clear, this is prior to any disturbance.
Right, prior to any kind of digging or anything of that nature. So
What sheet is this? So it's
SP3, right, and SP3 has here right straight from the national, from the DEP, all their requirements for what time to do this in. They want us to do this prior to October 15th, and then we can't do any, if the sweep hasn't been done yet, we can't do any work between November and March, because that's when they're going to be hiding under the ground. We have to only go out there when they're active so we can see them. And then we have to, once we do see them on site, we move them outside the barrier and they can't come back in. That's basically to protect any turtles that are out there. Another thing that we have to kind of protect the wetlands during construction is sedimentation basins. We have two, one here and one here. And basically we'll have some diversion berms once we start doing that work, once the area's been swept for turtles. And that's when, during construction, if it was to rain and these ponds are not built yet, the water gets diverted into these basically sedimentation basins are like holes in the ground, and that the water will collect there. All the mud will settle out of them, and they won't, and it won't push against this silt fence and try to transmit any kind of debris or mud into the wetlands itself. And I think that's basically what I came up here to talk about. And I hope I was clear. And if anybody has any questions, I'd love to answer them.
Okay. Is this the end of your presentation? Why don't we finish it, and then we can open it up to questions?
Sure. I'll just have him explain, because all of this, from a zoning perspective, is a very big project. From a wetlands perspective and looking at it through the glasses that we use tonight, Manny, explain what we're talking about, which is basically we're doing some grading.
Right.
We're going to be taking advantage of an existing drainage basin, adding a small drainage basin, and I think this is just part of, in a retention basin. So explain the reason for the grading versus a retaining wall, and why you chose to do that. And keep in mind, all of this is outside the wetlands.
Right. So what Mr. Rizzio Attorney Rizzio is talking about is that we chose to do a sloped, so there's a 15-foot difference from where we have an emergency access way here, which is required by the fire marshal. And what we did was we just sloped that 15 foot, even though the toe of slope got a little closer to the wetlands, we preferred having kind of a natural slope to the wetlands up to the property versus having another 25 feet of undisturbed area and then having a vertical retaining wall with a fence on top. You know, I think that even for future, you know, for the habitat, once the project is in place, having that slope there is much better than just having a retaining wall. And it's kind of, you know, you're looking at a retaining wall. And this way, the area will be lawn, it'll have landscaping, and it'll be more of a transition area from our development into the wetland area.
Right. And this plunge pool that we're going to construct, this is the existing drainage basin.
Right.
Is even further away from the wetlands than the
Correct.
existing approved drainage basin.
Right. The closest implement to this wetlands from this on this project is basically the existing the existing retention pond, which if you go out there, you can barely see it. I mean, that's what happens to these things. If you don't maintain them correctly, they kind of disappear into the nature of the area, right? So the only thing that you're going to see past this emergency access way is going to be kind of a landscaped area, and then these areas where the ponds are going to be is going to be maintained, so there's going to be a clearing inside the ponds, basically. But around them will be vegetated. Good?
Now, I guess in conclusion, I hope we demonstrated, in conclusion, I'd like to think that we demonstrated that there will be no negative impact. I think the picture that you showed before was perfectly, Commissioner, that showed the amount of wetlands, the amount of upland, and how our clients did the best they could to keep provide the largest buffer to the neighborhoods and from the wetlands. There's no crossing, there's no filling, there's no disturbance of the wetlands. There are adequate conditions, I think, that we propose to ensure that there's no disturbance on the wetlands. We're willing for you also to condition it on a wetlands monitor, but we'll pay for from the town that would supervise and make sure that the installation of the silt fence was correct and those things. And keep in mind, what we're really talking about is but for timing and but for market conditions and demand. That's sort of it was already previously approved in '99. What you had is basically a similar project, actually more impervious and less what we'll consider detention areas, unless I think they've enhanced certainly the stormwater management aspects of this. Would that be correct? So
the prior approval was just looking at volumetric control, right? Now we're looking, because we are now 23 years later, 24 years later, now we're more sensitive to not just having a volumetric control and controlling it throughout all the different storms, but also increasing the water quality that's coming out of our systems now. So the DEP, when we meet these stormwater manual requirements, our water quality is increased from the existing conditions, and so is our volume has increased.
and that's basically our presentation. I assume
Okay.
after most of the public comes up and supports it, I'll get back up and say.
All right, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to ask Staff Kelly if she has any questions or comments, and then we'll open it up to questions from the commissioners.
I did supply some comments to the engineer, and we did just receive them, so I haven't had a chance to really look at them yet, since we just received them, so I may have some additional comments. But I did want to touch on something. Mr. Silva, you mentioned that the detention basin that's existing perhaps may not have been maintained and has disappeared somewhat into the woods. Do you have any records on detention basin maintenance that the current property owner does have that you could share? Not right now, obviously.
Manny Silva Rostizo. So again, the area around the basin has become overgrown. So, but we did go in there and look at if the control structures were still functioning the way they were supposed to, and that was clear. So obviously there was some maintenance to the inside of the basin itself, just not necessarily to the perimeter or the areas around it. So
Additionally, our client who did the original development, just repurchased this property recently. It had been sold and then made available back to our client within the last 2 years. So we don't, there's a gap in our, as far as when we owned it, it was taken care of to protect our interests. As I said, they've done a great job with 99 Hawley. Hospital's very happy there, and there was great interest in making sure that the proper thing was done with the balance of the property when our client purchased the property, repurchased the property a couple of years ago, and then worked with planning and zoning to create this mixed-use campus environment.
Okay.
So to kind of answer your question, has been maintained, but basically just the control structure area and the base of the pond itself. I would like to see, I don't like to see trees growing in the embankments of it, like you could see from the aerial. It's kind of has trees growing out of the perimeter of the basin itself.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. And I do have one more question. This may perhaps be more for George, or maybe you need another specialist. There's some bedrock removal proposed. Are you anticipating any acid rock issues impacting the wetland during construction?
Manny Silva again. So the rock that we see is a knob here in this corner, and then there's some rock here, which is, the furthest points on this project from the wetlands itself. There is an actual retaining wall between these two areas from this project because the rock kind of went to a valley, so they had to build a reverse lock retaining wall there, so we don't anticipate any rock in this area in between. So we're going to do some blasting. There's going to have to be a permit from the fire marshal. There's going to be a survey done with all the neighboring properties to make sure that when the blasting is done, that there isn't any damage done to those properties, and if there is, we mitigate it. But to the wetlands itself, I don't see it because our property plateau is 15 feet above the wetlands, right? So we're not going to be under blasting below the wetland level itself.
Right, I guess I'm thinking more like runoff if there's a precipitation event during any blasting activities.
Right, so
this is in the same formation as another development in town, and they did an acid rock investigation.
Okay.
So maybe that's something
Yeah,
that
we can
perhaps look into.
definitely do that.
Okay.
I mean, and we have our temporary sedimentation basins where they can do the testing from that to see, because once any runoff comes off of that rock, it'll be in there. And that's where we'll do the testing and kind of see if we have to do any kind of additional measures.
Okay, great, thank you.
No problem.
That's all I have at this time.
Can I also add for the record the mailings, just if I'm concluding, I just want to pass them on. Those are certificates of mailing.
Thank you.
Okay.
We'd be happy to answer any questions from the commissioners.
All right, any questions from the commission?
I can go first. Okay.
Angela?
Yes. Okay. So few questions. Your soil scientist mentioned triclopyre.
George, can you come up here? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
What is triclopyre and what does it do?
Triclopyre.
Triclopyre.
You probably know it as one of the formulations is Brush Be Gone. It's a Bayer product. A Garland is another one, another formulation. It's basically a herbicide. And it's a different one than the whole family of glyphosates. It's a completely different family. And we don't like using glyphosate because obviously there's been some issues with that. But triclopyre is much more target specific to plants.
Okay.
that you
So-
want to get rid of.
So what makes it different from glyphosates, and what is in it? Because you have the tri, which is 3, the chlorine, and pyrene, which is what?
Yeah, so it's, yeah, I would have to get you that information. I don't remember off the top of my head what its exact formulation is, but there's probably a material safety sheet that one can provide to, if the commission's interested, I can provide that. And I also have a publication that compares glyphosate and triclopyr as far as its uses for this kind of eradication control of invasives, and I could provide that too.
Okay, and I'm also curious about the collodial fraction of sediment. So what makes that better?
Colloidal fraction. That's a good question. So the finest sediment, part of sediment is clay particles, right? So those are the finest. Colloidal is even finer, but it still carries nutrients with it. So that's someone that's in suspension, and it's not structural anymore. It's become part of, it's in solution with the water. That's the colloidal fraction. Good example would be organics. Those become, and once they get into the water and they're not any more organic particles, they're dissolved into the water itself, and becomes the colloidal fraction. It's like a step between being in suspension and being completely in solution, in between.
Okay, so what makes that better than a hay bale?
Because it's able to take that fraction off, so because you have to remember, these are a lot of fibers. It's not just one hay bale, which is, straw. It's more or less of similar structure. When you put a filter berm there, it has a lot of interlacing fibers. Some are very, very small, some are larger, obviously, and that allows for a much better filtration. And on top of that, it has sort of an adsorptive capacity, which means that as things goes through, it attracts them and keeps them sort of there instead of letting them go through. So, and again, this is based also on, and I could provide that too, is that study that was done by Connecticut DOT.
Keep
Okay.
in mind, this was an additional condition. I mean, if the commission is comfortable with the
Hay bales and silt fence.
hay bales and cell fence, we're comfortable with that.
Okay, because again, I'm also curious about the wood chip filter berm. Again, how big are the wood chips? Are they small? Are they large? Are you worried about attracting, bugs with that? How does that work?
No, it doesn't attract bugs. I mean, it's once you put it in place, it starts basically decaying slightly. So the only drawback is that it releases a little bit of phosphorus. As it decays, it releases phosphorus because there's phosphorus and a little nitrogen too in the fibers as they decay. But it doesn't go anywhere. It stays basically within the mass of wood chips. So it's like leaves falling from a tree down onto the ground. But again, if this commission goes to the next meeting, I can provide all that information.
Okay, and I have a question, I don't know who'd answer it, but as far as the cubic yards, in one of the papers we received about the cubic yards with the poundage, you're saying cubic yards, how much would that be in pounds?
Bedrock, is that what we're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to, the engineer, I can't do that in my head. But I just want to make it clear on that other, this whole wood chip berm, what we propose in our application, what the commission has traditionally approved is hay bales and silt fence. If the commission wanted it as an additional condition, this wood berm would be willing to do that. I'm trying to do a calculation. I can give you that later in the meeting.
All right.
I assume you'll hear from me again.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Mr. Wade?
based on the complex, which direction is your sanitary sewer lines gonna run? They're gonna run them out? Because down at the bottom of the corner, I see the sanitary sewer easement, so I don't know, in the bottom right-hand corner, so I'm concerned about what direction you're actually gonna hook up your lines. I mean, they can't go into the wetlands or underneath, so, yeah.
So our sewers are going to a, yeah, you did, sorry. You're not the engineer. The sanitary sewers come to a, yeah, you're good. Go to a pump chamber here. So there's gonna be a holding tank and then a pump chamber, and then that comes up to Armory Road. There's gonna be, there's an existing sewer in Armory Road right now. Yeah, yeah, because we're down below Armory Road, right? So, yeah, so we're gonna need we're gonna have a duplexed injector pump, basically two pumps inside of a chamber. One pump, basically, one pump can do the whole job, but we're just gonna have two in there as redundant, and they're gonna alternate. One's gonna go, and then the next one's gonna go. And they're gonna have alarms, so.
Sanitary easement.
As far as the weight, a cubic yard's about 1.5 tons per cubic yard, and we have 900 cubic yards of rock, so that calculates out to
1,800 a ton.
a lot of tons, and times 900, about 1,300, 1,400 tons of rock. Rock's heavy, so.
Anything else?
Yeah.
Yes.
Anything else,
Yep.
John? Any other
I'm
questions?
sorry.
Any other questions from the
Yeah.
commission?
It's not gonna be a town maintained, it's
Okay,
gonna
well,
be
hang on a
private
second.
maintained. Yeah, so they're gonna have to have someone, the property manager's gonna have to hire someone that does work on those, and they're gonna have to maintain it every year. Correct. Yep, and they're gonna have a generator. Mhm. Mhm.
Dennis, turn your microphone on.
The nurse that attended him didn't realize it was a pump-up.
Right.
She put her rubber gloves in there until the alarm went off.
Yep.
Now, that was on a single-family house, but you're talking multi-dwelling.
Yeah. So,
No.
so these apartment buildings, I know that you're a pump I know you used to be in the pump industry, correct?
Yeah.
So these pumps will have a shark grinder on them, right? And because it's a part of a bigger community, they're gonna have a regular maintenance person go in there all the time.
Well, that's what I was saying.
And the alarm system on it will call those people automatically.
Right, because it becomes a problem when
Right.
this thing, everybody blames
The
the
next guy.
paraplegic.
Yeah.
I mean, this
No,
happened.
correct. So, I mean, even the town pumps have the same issues, right? I mean, with grit and things of that
Yeah,
nature.
they maintain their pumps.
Right, so this is kind of,
Little
we'll
better
have
than private.
the condominium, in this case, or whoever owns the building, will have a maintenance person to maintain that on a
Because
regular
in the
basis.
end, that thing goes, they call
Yeah.
the town.
Oh, yeah, they're gonna have a big problem.
Yeah, and
Well,
then now the town
yeah,
has to handle it.
right. So it's gonna be a duplex pump for redundancy, and then they're gonna have shark grinders on them, and then it's gonna have a generator for power backup. Okay,
Okay.
sure. Happy to answer them.
All right. Let's see.
Back to the bedrock, so you said 900 cubic yards. I saw somewhere in some of the paperwork, a net of 1,000 cubic yards. Was that import or export?
Yeah, it was just like 900, just under 1,000.
What was that, import or export?
It's a cut, so it's an export.
So that will be removed,
Yeah,
right?
and that's overall, Phil. It's not necessarily rock. We won't know exactly how much rock in there until we start doing some borings.
But the larger number is roughly 23,000 or 25,000
Right.
that you're working with, right?
So so what it is that because we need the majority of the fill on site, right? So we're just gonna level it out. We're moving the back portion near Big Y that's high, and we're bringing it up so that we can flatten it away, towards the wetland area. Obviously, far from the wetland area, but what it is that we're gonna be cutting 22,000, and then filling 21,000, so we're gonna have an excess, meaning we're gonna have too much by
Right.
900 cubic yards.
Okay. So, and again, it seems probably obvious that because you're just changing the topography that way, you're not
Right.
changing the area necessarily, you're
No.
leveling.
Right.
This has all been assessed as part of the
Correct.
impacts that it will not really adversely affect the wetlands.
No, we're just moving some dirt from the back of the portion.
It'll just be a huge challenge, but otherwise,
It's not huge. I mean,
Not a huge
nowadays,
challenge.
I mean,
Okay.
we live in Connecticut, we're used to it.
okay.
Yeah.
Because visually it's steep, so I just
Right.
personally was curious
Right,
about
so, I mean, just like the big Y thing was not flat, and now it is, so.
it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then just out of curiosity, to the furthest to the east, there was a pond, I think, there, that has on one of the maps, no, to the east, to the right? It has a chain link fence around it. Is that a requirement from a safety perspective?
Yeah, we just don't want people walking
You
into it.
don't want kids to,
Yeah, walking
Okay.
and falling into the pond, sure.
okay, that's
Yep.
all that is,
Yep.
okay.
Fall protection.
Okay, thank you.
That's it? Any other questions?
I have a question.
Mr. Blake?
Good evening. I have a question about the retention pools. You stated earlier that you own the property and you maintained them, and then you didn't own the property for a period of time and they were not maintained.
We don't have the records, there's a gap.
Okay,
We owned it, developed 99 Holly Lane, the rights, because even though they're one parcel, for zoning purposes, they were technically condominium. So our client retained the office building and the parking garage. The other condominium parcel, which would have been this larger parcel.
yeah,
Was sold, and then our client reacquired it.
Reacquired.
So there's a gap.
which was a short period of time where that your client was not the owner, and there was some overgrowth. It looked like they
Yeah.
when you guys went in and cleared out the.
Right, but it's not like, so just to be clear, I've seen retention ponds that have not been touched, and you can't see any of the, so there's a catch
Right.
basin riser with a bunch of orifices in it to control what comes out, meaning holes, and they were all visible. I've seen retention ponds where the silt comes all the way up almost to the overflow, and that's not here, no.
That's not here. So, my question is, and I guess we can group this in with the, because I'm not an expert, but the filtration, you said you're gonna have cleaner water going to these ponds. I don't know what that system is made of. My question is, once you are no longer the owner, if this project goes and you sell all the properties, who is going to maintain that filtration system, those retention ponds, in order to prevent malfunction, defects, and negatively impacting the wetlands?
Right, so there's gonna be an operations and owner and operation manual that's gonna be put on the land records. Normally, that's what planning and zoning makes us do, you can do that too. And that is going to have who is responsible for that. So if this becomes a condominium, it'll be the condominium association. If it's a rental property that has one owner, then it's that one owner. And what happens is, what that operations manual will have is exactly what they have to do when certain things, how much the frequency of inspection, at what point do they have to start dredging or pumping things out, cleaning them, and if someone doesn't do what they're supposed to do, the town can make them, because it's on the land records, the town can make them do that.
That written plan will be submitted to us, or just planning and zoning?
We can submit it to staff, and then.
Yes, please.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll agree as another condition of approval to submit operations manual, but be approved by staff and be recorded on the land records with the approval, so that you've got both wetlands and planning and zoning kind of bootstrapping the approval.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Finch?
Yes, sir. The stormwater infrastructure system, could it ever experience a blockage, like say the freezing in the pipes or anything when the water might have to be diverted?
So freezing of the pipes wouldn't be an issue because we put them below we put them underground, so that's below the frost line, and water that moves doesn't tend to freeze as easy. So you'll get some freezing in the ponds, but that's just surface freezing. The water be underneath, and then if it fills up and it hits the ice out, it'll just break it up and try, raise the ice up higher. Will there be any blockages? That can happen. Someone could put it, you can get a piece of cardboard or something covering a catch basin, but they'll just have to go out and remove that. And again, with the maintenance manual, One of the things we have to look at is all the catch basins to see if they need to be vacuumed out, for if there's any sediment in them. And the stormwater filtration systems, which are the downstream defenders, those will also have to be looked at every 6 months or a year, depending on what the cycle is. What we see the thing filling up, over time, and we'll have to pump those out too. Yep, you're welcome.
Okay, so
Commissioner.
I have a piggyback question on that. So you just said you're going to take that 1,400 tons of rock, move it, kind of, make it level, and then you're saying the pipes are going to go underground.
Right.
So is that before or after you're moving all this bedrock?
So it's kind of a little bit of both. So what we'll do is we'll blast that rock first. We'll drill it and blast it, get it all loose. And then what we'll do is we'll start creating a rough grade with the material. And then what they'll do is they'll actually excavate out the lines where the pipes are going to go. And in those trenches, they're going to put sand and finer material to kind of protect the pipe, because you don't want to put pipe against like jagged rocks and things of that nature, or puncturing them. And then, so you'll have aggregate material and then fine sand to kind of level the pipe up, and then it'll have some coarser material above with a warning tape, so that people can find it later with a locator, or even when you're digging, you'll see right on there, there'll be a warning tape saying, oh, there's a stormwater line here, there's an electric line, there's a gas line.
It's all track that call before you dig, it's a real thing.
Yeah, so.
It's all mapped, monitored, and then.
Yeah, we use this tape so we can trace all the lines after the fact, years from now.
Any other questions? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to reserve the right to further question after public comments in case anything comes up that needs to be questioned.
Any comments from the public, right?
Okay, so is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone like to speak in favor of this petition? All right. We have a list here of people that want to speak, I presume. Pardon me? Yeah. All right, so has everyone who wants to speak signed up? Okay. Okay, well, you can sign up, you'll be the last one. That's the way it goes. Okay, the first person we have is Paula Sweeney, 197 Short Beach Road. Sweely, I'm sorry. These aren't my regular glasses.
So, this commission, as I read on the town website, the purpose is to protect and regulate activities affecting the inland wetlands and watercourses within the town. Mr. Fahey and members of the... Can you... Was I speaking into the microphone? So I got to do that. Members of the Inland Wetlands Commission, thank you all for your service, and in this instance, you are called upon to protect an extremely valuable area of Stratford wetlands and green space from the destructive effects of the proposed 129-unit apartment complex. Last Monday night, at the forum prior to the council meeting, members of the public spoke against the proposed development on the center school site. They gave many valid reasons: traffic congestion, safety for neighborhood children, flooding potential, and more. All of these comments against the proposed development met with rousing applause from those present. Then, towards the end of the public comments, I felt sorry for the member of the Planning Commission who described how long and hard that group had worked on recommending the developer and the project plans. He was very excited and proud about it. He ended with saying how he felt amazed that Stratford could have such an impressive project. The response from those present was dead silence. People simply did not see the project as appropriate for that spot. They did not want it there for many valid reasons. The same situation exists for the proposed Holly Lane development. There have been no ecological studies apart from the developer. Before long hours are spent by your commission on whether or not to give your approval. Your commission is charged with protecting what is one of the few green areas left in our town, and you need the complete picture, which necessitates an ecological evaluation by an agency apart from the developer. I thank you again for all of your hard work and rely on your commission to first get the full information with an impartial assessment of the effect on the ecology of this development. It's a very delicate balance in the wetlands, but also there's cutting down of trees and just other destruction in the meantime in the rest of the green space. So the developer's responsibility is to make a profit. Yours is to protect the delicate balance provided by healthy and protected wetlands for the people of Stratford. Now, since I seem to have a little more time, I have 3 wishes, all made with the goal of greater inclusion of the public in decisions that affect our community. First of all, that hearings and their purpose be clearly posted prominently on the town website and in the mayor's newsletter well ahead of their dates, rather than just in the Connecticut Post Classified, and that direct access to committees and commissions via an email address be made available to the public. Currently, any communication with your commission has to go to Ms. Kerrigan, rather than to you, Mr. Fahey, or some email for your commission. Secondly, that signs be placed prominently in front of properties which have been proposed by developers for construction projects, explaining briefly what the developer wishes to do. And third, that developers be required to have appropriate studies for traffic and ecology done before their applications are considered by the appropriate committee and commission. What I'm seeing, just very quickly, you know, people say, well, this was at Short Beach. What's happening there out at Short Beach next to the tennis courts? Nothing up there to explain it. And one person said, well, maybe it's another parking lot. Maybe it's because Blue's on the beach. The public is kind of in the dark about many things, which we shouldn't be. So that's just a general comment. And I applaud you for your expertise, because much of what was said here tonight we couldn't see sitting out in the audience. And I really had trouble understanding some of the speakers. But I applaud you for your knowledge. You seem to be, you know, understanding many things which I can't. Thank you for your service again, and good night.
Okay, next speaker. Is it Grace Arpey? Is that right? Yes, Arpey. Pardon me? No, I can see him. I don't know if I can say him right, that's all.
Can you hear me? Is this, okay. Grace Arpey, 34 Chelsea Street. So as I understand it, this area is in the natural diversity database area due to the presence of eastern box turtles, which is a state-listed species of special concern in Connecticut. I would really encourage you, if you haven't already, to look at the map, the natural diversity database map, and also compare it to, obviously we know the area, but maybe compare it to a satellite view of the area. And you'll see that this small piece of wetland is really the last piece of habitat that's left in that general area that box turtles can use. It's not sustainable to keep pushing wildlife into smaller and smaller habitat fragments. That eventually leads to local extinction of these species. Box turtles also use forested areas as well as wetlands, so development will absolutely have an effect here in both the upland and the wetland areas. I asked the commission to hire their own herpetologist or biologist to conduct a wildlife inventory of the property, especially to determine the status of box turtles here. I really think we need to start doing better in Stratford with protecting and conserving our environment as well as our wildlife. Loss of habitat is the biggest threat to box turtles. I would like to see the town of Stratford purchase the property from the owner under the State Open Space and Watershed Land Acquisition Grant Program and preserve it. Ultimately preserve it for, as open space with passive recreation for residents to enjoy. It's the right of inland wetlands commissions in Connecticut to request wildlife assessments as part of the review process. And you can verify that on the website of the Connecticut Association of Wetland Scientists at ctwetlands.org. Please take advantage of this in order to make an informed decision and do not allow this development to destroy this natural area.
Thank you. Next speaker, Peter Bowe, 1705 Elm Street.
I made a copy of my statement, if I could pass that on to, I think I have 7, not 8 or 9. Again, Peter Bowe, 1705 Elm Street. I'm the former science department head for Bunnell High School. I've also overseen Stratford's environmental science and chemistry curriculums and have taught chemistry and environmental science for 28 years. How many are there? I also have my master's in bio and chemistry from the University of Connecticut, and I strongly oppose the development proposal for the property adjacent to 99 Hawley Lane, the following reasons. First off, there was mention made of the Big Y site, but if you go across the street into Trumbull, the current development there exists over 70 acres of paved land, buildings, in close proximity to the wetland site. To allude to Mr. Karpiski's comment, and there's a topo map on the back, Merritt 8 is 194 feet above sea level. The wetland is 124. So there's actually a grade of 70 feet. The decreasing elevation, well, first off with those topo maps, there will be an impact on the groundwater. The wetland is recharged from the groundwater from actually Beaver Dam and Roosevelt Forest groundwater. The environmental impact wouldn't simply impact the development, but would have potential impact on Veterans Park wetlands that's 400 feet to the south, Worcester Pond in line with that groundwater, and Bruce's Brook, which flows all the way to the Sound and enters the Sound near the East End Yacht Club. You can reference those topo maps. The water runoff, they have an extensive plan to abate any problems with that. But come on, we have multi-million-dollar sewage treatment plants that fail during storms. The catch basins at Longbrook Park don't work. So the runoff potentially could have a problem with the buildup in the pond. But what concerned me, and I spoke to a former senior analyst with the DEP who for 28 years spearheaded the Raymark cleanup in this town. And the site preparation, I asked about this. Any blasting of rock can damage the wetland. Solid rock contains water. Crushed rock stone will not hold water and can cause drainage of the wetland by disrupting the water table. But I was even more shocked because at places in Connecticut where blasting has been done, the exposed rock area, the crushed stone is going to have a surface area thousands, if not tens of thousands of times more than the solid rock, dramatically changes the groundwater flow. That former official said to me that that's also going to impact the solubility. It causes leaching from those type of rocks of iron and manganese into the water. You'd need to have not secondary, but more than tertiary treatment to remove those. Well, what's the big deal? You know, we need iron in our diet, but what are the harmful effects of manganese? Workers may be harmed by exposure to manganese through breathing, manganese fumes, or contaminated water. Continued exposure can cause damage to lungs, liver, kidneys, as well as infertility and birth defects. Now, everybody in this area has city water, but the wildlife don't. So this would impact water quality along that path from their site down the 6 miles to where the East End Yacht Club is. Those areas could potentially be contaminated. As I said, most people have private, are on city water, but if there are private wells, that could cause a problem. The wetland is not an isolated entity, but rather one that exists in a dynamic relationship with the surrounding woodlands, as some of the previous speakers mentioned. Many of the species overlap the two. Degrading the adjacent woodlands would adversely affect the wildlife that utilize both systems. Also not brought into it, it's not a water quality issue, but light pollution in the area would have to be controlled that would negatively impact. The other question, and again, having taught chemistry and biology, the structure for trichloro-pyrade is C7H4Cl3 with a nitrate sticking off the end, an NO3. It's a benzene-like structure. Most pesticides, how do they work? They magically kill one thing and not another. But when you look at hormones, they act like a hormone. They act like a hormone that's going to either kill or inhibit the growth of a plant. So that that was a concern that would possibly be something that would be used there. So again, I've given you the copies of these. It has the topo maps. Also, thanks to Google Map, the road going from East End Yacht Club to 99 Hawley Avenue pretty much follows the water course and groundwater flow that would be through that area. So again, the proposal, they put together an extensive effort to maintain the area. However, as I said, with our sewage treatment plants that are publicly owned and funded, they don't work all the time. And having a private system, that's like me taking my boat out and it's like, oh, doesn't matter, I've got a crack in the bottom. My pump is going to pump out 2 gallons of water for every gallon I take in, unless my pump breaks, and that's going to cause problems. So again, I know you've put tremendous effort into this proposal, but not in Stratford. Okay, thank you very much. Please do your job.
Next speaker, Laura Dancho, 30 Ruby Lane.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Laura Dancho, and I live at 30 Ruby Lane in Stratford. Thank you, Commissioners, Chairman Fay, Ms. Kerrigan, for all of your due diligence on this very difficult committee. 99 Holly Lane, as you know, is a 34-acre parcel, of which 17 acres is conservation area, and 10.6 acres within are wetlands. The Inland Wetland Commission conducted a walkthrough of 99 Holly Lane and Teakwood Estates on Friday, June 10th for a thorough survey of these environmental spaces. I am councilperson for both of these areas, and I'm interested in the findings of not only the animal life and the water tables that would affect the surrounding residents, but also the foliage and the number of native trees that would need to be removed for a potential development, and the percentage of tree canopy loss, among other things. As you can imagine, many residents have concerns with the development of 99 Holly Lane, with the amount of traffic issues already being endured by the residents. However, the purview of this committee is how the proposed development will impact the highly functioning wetlands, identified conservation areas, and affect the existing overall flooding conditions. I have heard from many residents who border the property from 99 Holly Lane to Veterans Park on Seabreeze, Washburn, as well as residents on Holly Lane, Fairfax, Plane Tree, and Zenith Drive, all with flooding issues which were worsened since the development of the Big Y complex. Future maintenance and control comes under question after tonight's presentation of the existing retention pond at Big Y, and residents must be provided a clear solution to their flooding concerns other than the standard catch basin fix that we know never works. Disrupting the natural function of a wetland negatively impacts wildlife, their food source, and the natural slow release of surface water that helps to alleviate flooding. Why recreate a wetlands when no one wants the development in the first place? Additional development of this area has been pursued in the past, and I ask this committee to carefully review the reasons for the previous denials, as the conditions and ramifications of adding housing to this sensitive area have only changed for the worse. Housing alternatives do not need to further encroach into the very few remaining green spaces we have in Stratford. While development perimeters to wetlands may be established, development adds people, people bring trash, noise, and the need for extra lighting, all of which are detrimental to the life of the wetland. People also bring vehicles and the need to create impervious parking areas, as well as the potential of oil and antifreeze leakage. Draining of these toxins into the sensitive wetland will cause these areas to die. We talked tonight about how clean the water is going to be. I'd like to know how they're going to clean out the toxins. Conclusion, I respectfully request the Inland Wetlands Commission deny the application of Mountain Development Corp. A lot of promises were made here tonight, contingent on ownership that will require the town to be consistently aware of what's going on the property. If the committee chooses to further consider this proposal, an impartial assessment of the area by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Northeast Region may be requested, and I encourage you to do so as an alternative prior to making any final decision tonight. Again, thank you for your time and for listening.
Thank you. Next speaker, Ken Warrington, 135 Planetary Road. Ken Warrington? Oh. The plans were in between us.
Hi. Good evening. My name is Ken Warrington. I live at 135 Plane Tree Road. I've been a resident there for 35 years. The last 14 years, I've lived with and I have seen the results of building on a wetland area. My property abuts the Big Y property. When you clear-cut trees for your project, stripping away the natural canopy, the remaining vegetation is exposed to light pollution, which changes the vegetation and the growth pattern of everything below. The massive amount of fill required to reach the grade for this project and the amount of blasting needed to lower the grade in some areas more than 10 feet. Will affect groundwater, runoff rate, absorption rate, and the direction of flow of the existing water. Runoff from over 325 parking spots carrying gas, oil, antifreeze, along with pesticides, and salt from snow plowing and snow dumping will definitely find its way into the wetland. Detention basins were mentioned, along with hydrodynamic separators, which, if properly maintained, will only remove floatable material. Nothing that is saturated in the water will be removed. Only fine solids or dissolved pollution, Not affected are some fine solids and dissolved pollutants. At some part in these talks, in the future, we'll hear the word economic development come up. I know that with the current climate change and the more superstorms and flooding occurring, our ecosystem is already threatened. So I wonder at what point and at what cost is economic development. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Liz. Is it Granling?
Good evening. Liz Gramling, 295 Fox Hill Road. I am here to ask you on behalf of my family and neighbors not to greenlight any proposal to build on or next to the wetlands at 99 Holly Lane. My husband and I bought our home 12 years ago and quickly fell in love with our quiet cul-de-sac and friendly neighbors. Those neighbors include the many wild creatures that inhabit the wetlands and woods at the end of our road. We've encountered deer, foxes, turkeys, skunks, possums, raccoons, woodchucks, rabbits, alongside squirrels, chipmunks, moles, voles, mice. Red-shouldered hawks regularly hang out in our trees, and our surrounding neighbors have seen coyotes and bobcats. Spring's arrival is heralded by the calls of peepers, and summer nights buzz with the activity of crickets and other bugs. These creatures are as much a part of the fabric of our neighborhood as our friendly next-door neighbor Ed, or our always helpful neighbors across the street, the Hubbles. To disturb their wetlands habitat and destroy its nearby woods would make our neighborhood poorer and drive our animal neighbors from their safe home. The proposed drilling and blasting at 99 Holly Lane would be upsetting for the humans in our neighborhood, but they would be absolutely traumatizing for our animal neighbors. This natural area is also crucial for absorbing rainfall in our area. With its destruction, we will see increased runoff and pollution in our waterways, and very likely increased flooding on our properties and potentially in our homes. Green spaces are disappearing all over town. We are losing so much of the natural beauty that helps make Stratford special. I understand the push to develop our town more, but I ask you to weigh the outcomes here. Is this the best location to build? Disruption to these wetlands and woods would cause irrevocable damage to our animal neighbors and our neighborhood, and would be a great loss for Stratford.
Thank you. Lisa Zawadsky.
Good evening, Lisa Zawadsky, 44 Elliott Street. The area around the wetlands at 99 Holly Lane must not be developed. This is an important ecosystem, not just for our town, but globally. These spaces are being destroyed, and with it, the flora and fauna that call it home. In particular here, the box turtle. This is a species of special concern per Connecticut DEEP. Please do not contribute to getting it moved to the endangered list. I request an independent herpetologist be brought in to study the turtles in this area. The pink lady slipper flower has also been seen in these woods. While it's not yet endangered, it is also a special concern in the state of Connecticut. Again, please do not contribute to the extinction of species in our world and in our town. The noise and vibration from construction will be detrimental to the animals that live in these woods, including the spring peeper frog. Wildlife will be forced to venture into the neighborhoods or the busy roads and be killed. Light pollution and noise will affect those that remain, and the wetlands will be forever changed, even if the building isn't happening directly on top of them. This plan is an egregious abuse of the 830 rule, bypassing our zoning regulations to destroy our environment under the guise of affordable housing that isn't affordable to those in need. And please, this group tonight and an expert who's admitted multiple times to not walking through the wetlands for a project of this size and scope, it's not appropriate. I'm not so ignorant to think that maybe it would never be developed, but this is huge with some sketchy maintenance, and perhaps if the real estate transaction was going to have it noted, then it should have been noted the last time it changed hands. So it concerns me there's already a problem in there that I didn't realize until I came tonight. So that maintenance is going to be an ongoing issue. It doesn't make any sense. And to answer your question regarding perhaps there were turtles before a larger population, they were. They were killed when Big Y was constructed. There's a headstone to them at the entrance to Big Y. I don't understand how this can continue to erode in Stratford. We've got to take control of the little green space we have, and certainly these wetlands must be protected. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Rodia.
Good evening, Karen Rodia, 2115 Cut Spring Road. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I am in complete opposition to this proposed development. I participated in the site walk that reviewed the area, and as you're aware, it consists of the wetlands, steep slopes, rock ledge, in addition to the valuable and irreplaceable wildlife habitat that lives in and is dependent on the wetlands and vegetation in this area. It is a challenging topography, to say the least, very challenging. One of my big concerns of this development is the amount of impervious surface proposed, as well as the runoff management plan that will completely change the hydrology of the wetlands, contrary to what they've told you, because it will. It's not going to be happening in a natural manner, and that is going to be devastating to the wetlands. And anybody that says that it's not going to have an impact on the wetlands is either not being truthful, or they're being directed by someone to mislead because it's impactful to the wetlands. We've already seen the impacts from what happened with Big Y. And you can ask the families that abut around it, the flooding that they experience. You can look, I grew up off of Holly Lane, and I spent a great deal of time in that area, and yes, there are turtles there. Yes, there are. Anyway, the area, this property is also very close to a protected town-owned property, which is the Snake Pit, or Veterans Park, whatever you want to call it. I know it as the Snake Pit. And the impact development would have on this protected resource is huge. And again, it all flows downhill. So the water will change the direction because of how the hydrology is going to be manipulated, and it will change all the way down. And to say that it's not going to is not truthful. The wildlife, I'm looking here. The wildlife that's dependent on these wetlands, and there are species that are on the endangered list in that area, and we should have a complete study and evaluation by U.S. Fish and Wildlife. You can do it through, contact their Northeast Region office, as well as the Connecticut DEP. With regard to the endangered species, we should be requesting this as your commissioners. You should be requesting this from these agencies because they're there to help you. My other concern is that any kind of blasting plans that I heard discussed tonight, the acid rock is a huge concern because it will literally turn everything red. If they encounter that and water hits it, anything in that path will turn red, and it will destroy vegetation, the wildlife, anything in the wetlands. So there should be a very detailed, the perk holes and checks for acid rock before anything is approved. That should be done in advance because it does contaminate and destroy. The trees coming down for this development in that area, it would be a complete annihilation, which will also change the hydrology of the wetland. And again, to say that it won't is not truthful or not based in reality, one of the two. Homeowners were promised when Big Y was developed that there would be no impact from wetlands, and they're constantly flooded out. A rainstorm like today, I'm willing to bet when they go home tonight, the water table is going to be up high, the ones that are close to where the impervious surfaces are from Big Y. So when you add those surfaces with the proposed surfaces, it's absolutely mind-boggling. And where's the water going to go? Retention ponds? Yeah, we've seen how well that works. Not. It's concerning. Another big concern is snow removal. That's something that nobody brought up. Snow removal. What are they going to do with the snow? Where are they going to put it? On the site? Are they going to dump it into the wetland? Who knows? They haven't discussed it. But snow removal is a big issue, and we've seen that with Avalonbay. It's very concerning. Sometimes they push it into the roadway, and it causes flooding under the bridge, but the homeowners adjacent, and there has to be a plan for that in place prior to approval because snow is water. Water has to go somewhere. And again, I respectfully request that you say no to this project, and we need an unbiased source for information like U.S. Fish and Wildlife or the DEP to evaluate the areas. And I also respectfully ask that the wetland maps be updated if they haven't been in the last 12 months, because we have seen changes, and that should be assessed as part of this. And I thank you so much for your time, and again, please just say no.
Thank you. Next speaker, Greg Dancho.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Greg Dancho, 30 Ruby Lane. I'd like to speak against the development of 99 Hawley Lane. In my day job, and if you don't know what my day job is, it's a zoo director at Connecticut Spearsley Zoo. I get many calls about wildlife in Stratford. More than ever, there are calls about bobcat, coyote, fox, raccoons, etc., being in residents' backyards. Some residents are very excited about this, while others are very concerned, which in turn could be very harmful to our native wild residents. As Stratford continues to develop these open space environments, the species that call these areas home will have less and less habitat and have more and more conflict with people. In addition, birds need these areas to rest and feed during migration season. The major commercial construction that has been mentioned before, now present on Hawley Lane, has already dispassionately, and I say very dispassionately, removed wetlands, habitat, and the animals from that zone. Sensitive areas such as the wetlands that can be adversely affected by this type of development initially, and even more so over time, should be thoroughly examined by multiple agencies to identify those species and habitat most likely to be endangered. Again, we have talked about the box turtles. Box turtles are a species of special concern in Connecticut, which you've heard. Box turtles have a very small home range and need uplands and wetlands for breeding and just living. They're moving to a new area will not be an option. You just can't pick a box turtle up. This is an area that they don't move very much, and moving them is not really an option for them. The amount of new residents that are proposed to live in this area can also have a detrimental effect on any fragile population. When you're talking about the amount of people that will live in this area, they're going to go into the wetlands. They're going to go and investigate. Kids are going to be in there. Kids are going to be kids, and again, can have a very detrimental effect on this any population in there. Stratford should make every effort to make smart choices on how and where development should occur for all its inhabitants, animal and human. Thank you.
Thank you. Nora Christensen.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for listening to us. I just want to point out, I would recommend an article. I know you know all this stuff, but there's a wonderful article in the New Yorker about the wetlands, written by Annie Prue. And as I said, I know you know these things, but I would like to just remind us of them. I'm going to read just a couple of sentences from her article. The wetlands cleanse the earth. In fact, they are carbon sinks that absorb CO2. And they are unparalleled in filtering out human waste, material from rotten carcasses, chemicals, and other pollutants. They recharge underground aquifers and sustain regional water resources, buffering the excesses of drought and flood. In aggregate, the watery parts of the earth stabilize its climate. Wetlands are known, and I'm sure you've heard this, as the kidneys of the landscape. Wetlands are sponges. They reduce flood drainage and erosion. They ensure a steady supply of water. They mitigate climate change. The wetlands store 10 times more carbon than regular trees and forests. We have this little gem, these wetlands. Whenever you impact or disturb something, there are repercussions. Drop a pebble in a pool, you know that, right? And it impacts something in Sierra Nevada. Wetlands are not resilient. Wetlands are not resilient. They are fragile. The custodians, well, I want to just read this one more sentence from the article. Between 2004 and 2009, 62,300 acres of wetlands disappeared to agricultural interests and housing developers in the United States. They are fragile, and we are their custodians, custodians of a very valuable natural resource. We must protect the wetlands from pollution and destruction because they are not only the habitat for diverse plants and animals and so much other diversity, but the wetlands are part of our habitat too. Let us not trash our own home. Thank you.
Thank you. Donna Z.
Good evening, Donna Zukowski, Fairfax Drive, Stratford. I have a question for the attorney for the developer. When notice was sent out, you sent this map, block. You're
Excuse
stating that
me.
it's,
This is only for comments, not,
Okay.
not back and forth.
I'm just saying like the amount of
Yeah,
the
exactly.
property I'm questioning. Because they're saying it's 33 acres, but according to the MBLU, it's only 8.62. And there's a separate property next to it. It's a different named owner, it's a different block. I don't know if they're consolidated or,
You want me to answer the question?
Okay, you can.
For the record, as I tried to explain before, the tax records and the actual land records differ a little bit, because when you have a condominium style of ownership, even if it's a land condominium, they get separate tax bills, and those units have a certain acreage. However, for zoning purposes, we still encompass the entire property. So there may be 2 or 3 tax bills for that lot, but the entire parcel is like 35 acres. However, the tax bills are separate. So there's a difference between a size for taxing purposes, a size for zoning purposes, and then an actual ownership. And zoning does not see condominium lots.
Right.
All they see is an outside lot. So is that clear enough for the commission?
Clear to me.
so there could be different named owners then?
Exactly.
Okay. Because that's not stated on his petition. Anyway, I agree with everybody's concerns here regarding the environment, the wildlife. There's a lot of rare animals in those woods that come out. If they build, where are they going to go? There's also plant life in there that's on the DEP list. That's also rare, and with more development, you know, there's going to be more flooding in that area. A lot of those houses already along Plaintree, Goldback, Fairfax are suffering from flooding. There's the land is starting to sink on sides. The fences are coming in, going down from all the development from the Big Y. So I have concerns with that. And then I also agree with Ms. Arpey for if we could get federal funds to buy that land and keep it as open green space. If not, they haven't been paying their taxes to the town, so maybe the town should start some foreclosure proceedings and take over the property that way. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We had one more. We had one more person who didn't sign up that wanted to speak. Okay. I think so. Yeah.
My name is Kelly McCarthy. I live on North Johnson Lane. Peacock Drive backs up to the back of the wetlands, and North Johnson is a T off of Peacock Drive. The turtles do exist. I have a picture on my phone, and they're in my yard all the time. There used to be more frequently after Big Y was built. We don't see them as often, but they are there. When Big Y was built, Attorney Knott said that it would not be offensive to the neighbors, that it wouldn't be seen, it wouldn't be an eyesore. It is. When it was built, it has completely changed the water table in the whole neighborhood, the whole area. My backyard, personally, is a flood zone. I joke with my neighbor who is a realtor and say every time it rains, probably today, right now, in my backyard, it looks like a river. I have an easement that runs through my property from the end of North Johnson that comes from the wetlands down North Johnson. It runs through my property. It's a water easement that comes through. So I'd like to know how this is going to affect my personal property. I'd like to know how the water, with the water table, my whole backyard is eroding ever since Big Y was built. I know that's a different property, but I'd like to know how, when you have this property that is high up with the water drainage that comes down, yes, you're gonna build all these basins and everything, but where truly does this water go? Like today, all this amount of rain, where does it go? It's impossible to catch. It's not natural. It's impossible to catch that amount of rain like today when it comes down that quickly to catch into these basins. Your gutters can't catch it. How can a basin catch it? So it's flooding our yards, it's flooding our basements. The blasting, when Big Y did all the blasting, they're gonna do blasting. It damaged our homes. My home was damaged. I got declined by insurance. I got declined by the blasting company. It's just ridiculous. The animal life, we see tons of animal life in there, and it's beautiful. You keep taking away their homes. They're building condos all over town. You take away their homes, where are these animals gonna go? There's no place left for them anymore. And I just think it's terrible. Back on November 18th, 1999, the buffer zone for the wetlands, it was stated in this article to protect our environment for Holly Lane, it was 75 feet. Is it now 25 feet or is it 75 feet? Which is it? It was stated 25 feet tonight. Is it 25 feet or is it 75 feet?
The upland review area on this property is 250 feet.
It is 250 feet?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. When Big Y was built, I don't know if it's the same owners that owned Big Y back then, November 18th, 1999. It's also stated in my article that I have here. I kept all my original documents. It said that in order to build the Big Y, that they would preserve 26 acres of open space. So how are we building this property now? Is there really that much property back in there that they could preserve 26 acres of property then, but now we can go ahead and build this property? Isn't it all there? So
Different properties, different owners.
different owners there's also
Different properties.
owners on landmarks that was just stated a little while ago with different tax records. Let's see. I just oppose it. That we live here. We just want to protect our wetlands. We want to protect our homes. Our homes were damaged when Big Y was built with the blasting, the water, the flooding. Our yards have changed. The water tables have changed. I just don't see how you can make all these promises when you're going to just come in for the money and you're going to build, and then you're going to walk away and sell the property and not care about the people that live here.
Thank you. We have one more person.
Hi, Susanna Smuldern. I live at 80 Peacock Drive, so I literally...
Name and address, please.
Sure. Susanna Smuldern. I am at 80 Peacock Drive. I literally...
Could you spell your last name?
Sure. It's Smaldone.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I literally live steps away from the wetland. At my house, I would be staring at the new property, basically, because I can see Big Y from my backyard. I wanted to, the gentlewoman had commented on the herbicide, and I am a doctor. I specialize in emergency medicine. I'm also a proud disabled veteran of the United States Army. I served as a water purification specialist in the Iraq War. And while the salts of the herbicide are non-toxic, the esters are. They are toxic. They are moderately to highly toxic, and they have been found in research animals to cause kidney and liver failure. Also, over time, they accumulate, and they thin the shells of eggs in wildlife. They can also cause skeletal malformations in wildlife. I've seen the turtles. They walk right through my backyard, actually, and several of its offspring, a couple of years ago, were struck and killed by cars on the road on Peacock Drive because their natural path goes from the wetland across the street into a neighbor's yard. So they have been and continue to be affected. Most of the animals that live in our backyard, they don't reside in the wetland. They reside around it. And as a QU grad, I was excited to see a bobcat back there. I mean, there's so many different forms of wildlife, and we enjoy seeing that. I'll leave you with this thought, that change invokes change. There's always a ripple effect. Nothing that you do or we do doesn't affect everything around us. So I implore you, please spare this very small piece of nature that still exists. Thank you.
Thank you. You have comments, right? You have written comments to read into it? Okay. Before we end this, we have some written comments that were submitted to Kelly that we want to read into the record as well.
First, is Grace Arpey still out there? Yes. Do you want me to read your email as well, or are you okay?
No, I would like just to read my comments that I made tonight.
Okay, all right, I won't read yours then. Yep, you're welcome. All right, starting with Heidi Berger. Dear Mr. Fahey and Ms. Kerrigan, I am writing to you to oppose the development of 99 Holly Lane. Much of it is wetlands, home to pepper frogs, turtles, deer, bobcat, and countless birds, just to name a few. It is full of trees and plants that sequester carbon, produce oxygen, and provide home to many species of wildlife. The development would not only destroy wildlife, but also flood the space with bright artificial lighting, which is bad for migrating birds and nocturnal pollinators. Traffic in this area is barely tolerable, and more multiplex housing will congest the streets even more. Please sell this land to a land trust instead of developing it. All right. Katie Sparer, or Katie Bow, sorry. Dear Mr. Fahey, my name is Katie Bow, and I live at 1705 Elm Street in Stratford. I am not able to attend the public hearing on this issue tomorrow night, but it is my understanding that we are allowed to write you about this issue. I understand that your commission is primarily concerned with the environmental science aspect of this issue rather than the zoning/quality of life aspect. I am not a science professional. However, I have been to the site as much as it was possible to see, and it is clearly a beautiful, pristine natural area that is home to an abundance of wildlife, the loss of which would be devastating. My main concern is a deep fear that the amount of blasting, laying down of asphalt, pavement, driveway sealers, etc., will do great damage to the water quality in those wetlands, as well as damage to wherever that water goes. Long Island Sound question. People's wells, if they're not, Long Island Sound, people's wells, if they are not hooked up to city water. Would there be metals from this massive construction that could poison the water that citizens use, children drink, food is prepared with? Stratford is still cleaning up the environmental mess from Raymark. Please do not allow one more developer to put his personal gain before the health and safety of our land and our citizens. Respectfully, Katie Bow. Got a few. This is from Kimberly Berger. I apologize if I'm incorrectly pronouncing these names. Addressing some concerns about the new planned apartments in our area. We chose to live in a quiet area that is slowly turning into a congested area with a lot of traffic that can't handle more coming in from a new apartment complex. The concerning parts are ruining wetlands, overcrowding our schools, and ruining quiet, dead-end neighborhoods. Funny, when we chose to move to Stratford 25 years ago, we had no land to build, and now the once quiet neighborhood will become even more congested, which makes us very unhappy. Thank you, Kimberly. This is a long one. This is from Marka Lay. To the leadership of Stratford, to the Inland Wetlands Commission, Environmental Superintendent Kelly Kerrigan. This is my official comment for the land in and around 99 Holly Lane, which includes but is not limited to wetlands and surrounding woods. Anyways, the wilderness, the woods, the ravines, the wetlands in and around 99 Holly Lane must not be developed. That is not only my opinion and the opinion of most Stratford residents, it is science. This area is a web of biodiversity. The wooded area planned for development is not separate, quote unquote separate from the wetlands. The wetlands would be severely negatively impacted not only by the aggressive, noisy digging, blasting, and building, but also by the very presence of humans living nearby. The loud explosions and harsh shaking will frighten animals both on and near wetlands, disrupting natural process like breeding and nesting. Endangered box turtle breeding grounds would be scattered and fragmented by the massive structure, inhibiting mating. Bright outdoor lighting would confuse nocturnal pollinators and migrating birds who use the moon as a guide. The sounds of humans making noise and driving their vehicles in what used to be their home would drive animals away, to wander into the yards of residents or to the parkway to perish. Please do not allow this to happen. Native plants seen there, such as pink lady slipper, one of the Northeast's very rare orchards, need specific conditions to grow, having a symbiotic relationship with fungi in the soil. Scientists are only just learning the complex biodiversity between soil fungi and microbes, plants, insects, mammals, birds, aquatic and semi-aquatic life like amphibians, turtles, etc. One wrong decision like building this structure could have a literal butterfly effect on the local species around it, perhaps losing some altogether. While it may seem preposterous that losing just one species can have such a dramatic effect, consider the ongoing chronicles of the reintroduction of wolves to Yellowstone National Park, which are bringing back balance after they were eradicated in the 1930s. She then provides a link, which I cannot obviously share with you folks, and then a quote, "It is like kicking a pebble down a mountain slope where conditions were just right that a falling pebble could trigger an avalanche of change. What we're finding is that ecosystems are incredibly complex." I'm not done yet. Next page. This is still from Mark Allais. Science is learning just how dependent species are on each other for survival, including humans. In parts of Asia, there has been such a dramatic loss of pollinators that farmers must pollinate pears by hand in order for the trees to bear fruit. This didn't happen by chance. It was caused by humans. We are also learning that our deserts, even the Sahara, were most likely caused by human activity. We have taken lush land teeming with life and literally sucked it dry. Cities nearby like New York and Hartford are typically 10 degrees hotter in the summer due to lack of plant life. We need this patch of green. In this area, spring peepers depend on specific wet conditions in the spring in order to mate. Changing the nearby land will most certainly alter them, redirecting the natural flow. Leveling nearby land will change the water table no matter what engineering practices are used, no matter how careful they say they would be. Tearing out these trees, aside from destroying the homes of predatory birds like owls and hawks, would open this wilderness to the hot sun, as the tree canopy is currently protecting the wetlands from drying up. I encourage the hiring of a herpetologist who can point out these species, particularly the endangered ones like turtles and salamanders. They are under a constant threat from developments like this one, because even if only nearby, it changes their habitat. The irony of the turtle statue in front of the Big Y continues to amaze me. It may as well be a gravestone for the turtles that have lost their lives to the construction and loss of habitat years ago. Don't let it happen again. I personally have video proof that peepers do exist that I can share, as I love their sound and have pulled over more than once to sit and listen. If this complex is allowed, the sound of peepers will be a thing of the past. That would be a tragedy. Please be protectors of this land, these animals, these trees, and plants on and around these wetlands. I suggest either selling or donating this land to, or donating this property to a land trust to preserve as wilderness as it is for nature. And then she did include some references on the internet, which are, again, links that I can't verbalize to you. And then she did also give a PDF printout of a change.org petition, but only one comment is on here, which I will now read. But it looks like there may be more, but I can't access a website right now. It says there's a, that's just the, hold on one second. Actually, none of the comments have come through on the change.org. It's just the explanation of what the petition is for. But unfortunately, we can't submit websites as into the record. But I do have a link to it as well. And that is the end of Mark Alay's testimony. And then I have a few more. Marilyn Berger. We live in the Big Y area and have many concerns over the apartments planned on the property behind Big Y. Our first concern is Holly Lane, Tavern Rock, Huntington intersection that cannot handle any more traffic than it already has. We also feel that all wetlands and wildlife will be completely ruined. People moved into this area for a reason, and now the dead-end, quiet roads will be taxed with traffic. This goes the same for our schools that are constantly having funds cut, soon will be overcrowded, with more families that will occupy these apartments. Marilyn Berger. Richard Maris. Richard and Mary Joan Maris are against any proposed building at 99 Holly Lane property. Property should remain as open space. And the last one I have is from Jessica Wolf. Dear Mr. Fahey, as I am not able to attend the July 18th hearing, I'm writing to express my strong concerns about the proposal for 129 apartments on 110,000 square feet, together with a community building of 2,500 square feet, plus parking spaces at 99 Holly Lane. As a resident of 305 Goldbach Drive, bordering the 99 Holly Lane property and inland wetlands around it, I am aware of flooding issues in the neighborhood as well as on my property. In addition to concerns about the impact of blasting and very significantly increased density of use as well as traffic on this land protected by law, the impact on the land as well as neighborhood traffic patterns would be significant. While I understand and support the need for affordable housing in our community according to Section 8-30G, housing should not be built at the cost of destroying precious natural resources and increasing stresses on an already densely populated neighborhood. Thank you for the Commission's consideration of preservation and neighborhood concerns. Sincerely, Jessica Wolf. And that is all I have.
Okay, so everyone's had a chance to speak. I want to ask commissioners if they have any further questions of the petitioner. Okay.
Chairman, members of the commission, Raymond Rizzio, and I certainly sense the public's frustration with overdevelopment. I see it in every town, but there is still doesn't mean that there can't be good development and development that complies with your regulations, complies with the zoning regulations, does not cause any negative effect on wetlands. In this issue, it's frustrating. I understand people don't like the traffic, they don't like how popular town has become, how everybody's moving here, but in this instance, we're going to come before you, not through an 8-30G. This is nothing jammed down the town's throat. This is going to come in 100% consistent with your zoning regulations, no request for variance. This is not an 8-30G where we're writing our own regulations and putting it upon the town of Stratford what we want. We are building something that's in compliance with both, I believe, both your zoning regulations and your regulations concerning inland wetlands and with regard to your authority. I almost think that no one really looked at our maps and no one looked at our plans and just had general frustration about the way the Big Y was built. We had nothing to do with the Big Y. There was already a project developed that was approved here over 20 years ago for the same size building on the same property with the same dimensions by the same different commissioners, but by an inland wetland commission. So we are not here trying to destroy an open space or convert an open space. In fact, we're not filling 1 inch of wetlands. We're not crossing an inch of wetlands. We are not temporarily or permanently disturbing any wetlands. We've marked limits of disturbance that will have actual boundaries. The commission, we would offer that all the other undeveloped land can have a conservation easement so that the people all the way down on Peacock Lane in North Bonson don't have to worry about any further development. We just checked quickly on the GIS map, and one of the people that complained tonight, their house on North Johnson Lane actually sits under the GIS map in wetlands. So they've lived around wetlands. We have basically 19 acres of undeveloped property out of 35 acres. What's interesting is when you look at people talking about how dense a development's going to be, if you look at the maps that were submitted tonight from Rose Tizo, our impervious area permitted within this subdivision would be 50%. We are only at 19%. Our buildings can go up to 25% of our land. Our buildings are only at 8%. So this is not a dense development. This is a development, unfortunately, has taken a lot of time. Unfortunately, is now subject to a lot of frustration by people for other projects that have been jammed down neighborhoods' throats in town. But let's look at the map. I think one of the commissioners showed what we actually have here. If you look at the entire parcel, and we get there eventually. If you look at the entire parcel, I don't know of a less dense development in town that I've presented, where you're going to have now, and we'll agree to propose, and the commission can adopt as a condition of approval, a conservation easement, and I'll mark this and leave it here, of everything outside the limit of disturbance. So now you're getting about, there's no section of land in town that's been dedicated as that, and you don't have to pay for it. We are not touching the wetlands. When you look at your obligations as commissioners, you have to judge it in a number of respects. The question is, will the proposed regulated activity negatively impact its capacity, the wetlands' capacity to support fish and wildlife and prevent flooding? You've heard from engineers, licensed soil scientists and ecologists that will not be the case. There is no evidence that any of this will cause any flooding. In fact, there'll be an improvement to the quality of the water and the control of the stormwater. The stormwater has been measured, the stormwater has been calculated, and in fact, this probably lessens the ability of flooding because now finally water coming off these large slopes will be controlled and not just run off without any regulation. You have to look at the supply of wetlands and protect the surrounding, any surface groundwaters. All we're going to do is cleanse the groundwaters. We are not lessening the supply of water. We are going to retain, clean, and then disperse the water as it would normally go. Control sediment. We're putting in sediment controls. You've heard very detailed explanation of the sediment controls that are put in there. We're facilitating drainage. We've heard about the spreaders. You've heard all the, I'm not going to go through it again. Our licensed engineer discussed all the instruments that will be implemented to make sure that there is no problem with drainage and control pollution. There's 19 acres that are not going to be disturbed. There is not only silt fence and hay bales, but we also agreed if the commission would like, we'd put a wood chip berm there to ensure that there be no disturbance or problem with the wetlands. Now, is this the most feasible and prudent alternative? We looked at splitting the buildings. We looked at the old approval and everything else impacted and created more impervious than the application that we have coming before you today, which, remember, only has less than 20% impervious on the entire 35 acres. I know of another project in town that has that situation. Will this affect long-term productivity of the wetlands? You've heard from our licensed soil scientist. I'll get him to state for the record that there is no issue here going forward, that with the adequate protections in place, and then additionally with regard to, I think it was section 5, and the questions brought in about the turtles. We researched it. I think it's SP5, right? Let me just tell you the exact number. SP3. We have a whole control and construction protocol that on SP3, which talks about how to handle wildlife during the construction period, and we will agree to, and these are the DEP guidelines. We'll abide by these DEP guidelines, and certainly the elements that are quoted on SP3 will be a condition of approval that we will agree to abide by, so that the protections for the wildlife are installed. Will it cause irreversible, irretrievable loss of wetlands? We're not touching any wetlands. We're not within, one small plunge pool is within about 35 feet, and all that's going to do is help control. We've also done is to limit the disturbance rather than putting up large retaining walls. We've agreed to slope the property so it's gentle, to add even lawn versus a large impervious, retaining wall, which is done in other projects. Will it impact downstream and nearby properties? When you look at the size of this property and where everything is, this is a lot together a development that impacted no residential properties. Look at the buffer here between our parking and where the homes are. And then keep in mind, there's a large rock outcropping that sits there. Then you have basically 10 acres of wetlands surrounded by another 9 acres of upland, and none of it's touched between our building and the homes. So you can't find a better insulated property that better protects the neighboring properties than this project. We're not trying to stick something in, stick houses in, and like, as I told you, we're willing to accept a condition of approval, as a condition of approval that a conservation easement be added, everything outside the limits of disturbance. So this wetlands now will be protected forever. Does it have any impacts beyond the property? We've heard from experts. Remember, keep in mind, there's been a lot of allegations, people speaking untruth, but there's been no expert who has got up and said anything that will demonstrate that there will be a negative effect on wetlands or a negative effect on wildlife. In fact, I believe by creating this conservation easement, what you will do will be protecting the wildlife and that whole ecosystem forever. But we're not touching it. We're not filling it. We're not crossing it. We're keeping adequate boundaries, placing limits of disturbance, and then putting it to bed forever so that you guys won't be having these discussions in the future. Have you provided control protections for the wetlands during construction? We just talked about that. We have a whole construction protocol, and additionally adding in the hay bales with the silt fence, and if the commission would like, we'd be happy to put in the wood berms. Unfortunately, because we had a lot of allegations by some opposition, I need our two experts to put some things on the record, if that's okay, and I'll get out of your way. I know it's been a long night. So Manny, if you can come up first, just talk about the...
Manny Silva from Rostizo. Just a couple of notes I took. Obviously, there was a lot of repetitive comments. So one of them was a concern about light pollution. We have a photometrics plan shown in the set that we don't have any light being infiltrated going into the wetland areas. We show spot locations, you can look at it yourself, where the light will be 0.0 foot candles, so there won't be any light. It'll be dark in the wetland area, so it won't disturb any of the wildlife. Number two, the downstream defender removal rate. So the downstream defenders are designed to do 95 to 80% TCSS removal down to 5 micrometers. So it's like particles that you'd have to use the microscope to see. And so we're completely confident. I mean, it's the standard. It's been approved by the DEP to use these swirl concentrators, not just to remove floatables, but also to remove grit and particles down to a very small size. So that's how we protect. And we do that before our storage, so before our ponds, before our infiltrators, so none of that goes into those structures and becomes a maintenance issue later on. As far as the acid rock monitoring, I think we could do that as a condition. We'll work with staff. Because we do have those temporary sedimentation basins, it gives us an opportunity to do water testing while blasting is going on, and then we can identify any acid rock right at the get-go, if there is any on site. As far as snow removal, we have a site plan that has substantial areas that don't have parking, like here in these landscape areas here and here. And that's where we would stockpile our snow, obviously uphill of our retention ponds, so that when the snow does melt, goes into our stormwater system, cleans it out, stores it in those retention ponds. We don't dump snow into the wetlands. That'd be a big no-no. I think that one of the standard conditions for wetlands is to have that demarcated with some kind of posts or something saying that those are wetland areas and not to go into there.
We have if the commission wanted to put some physical monuments to mark the wetlands so that no one would have to worry about people from the condominium, either sometimes they do split rail fence. We could do that along the limits of disturbance so that it would give the ability, you don't have to worry about people wandering off into the wetlands.
Yeah. And then the fifth one is the moving of turtles. Someone said that you can't move these turtles. We're not moving them to another location. We're moving them from literally the inside of the silt fence to the outside, so that once they we create that physical barrier for them during construction. If we sweep and see that there's any inside of that area, we just move them to the outside of the area towards the wetlands, and that's where they'll be, and they'll stay there. They won't be able to come back.
What you put down on SP3 was the stated DEP protocol for doing it?
Correct. Right. And then, in other cases, we've actually contacted DEP once we do find them to clarify, to make sure we're doing the correct thing. And like I said, we've done that on another site in town. And that's it for me, unless there's any other questions for me right now.
George Logan for the record. I'll try to be brief and just touch on maybe 4 things. At the end of your report that I gave you, the wetlands assessment, the last page has this picture. And this is the watershed for this wetland. And what you see that's interesting is that the majority of them in the watershed is that neighborhood, which doesn't have any controls for water quantity and doesn't have any controls for water quality. And yet this wetland is highly functioning. So I beg to differ. This is a resilient wetland. And we're not doing that. We're putting controls for water quantity, make sure no one gets flooded, and that there's a reduction, as you've heard. And we're putting controls for water quality, the ones that are recommended highly by the state. So the other thing that's interesting is hydrological impacts. You know, several of the neighbors are concerned about changes in hydrology of this wetland. There are wetlands out in the Connecticut landscape that are sensitive to hydrologic manipulations, and those are the ones usually that are on slopes, that are discharge wetlands mostly until topography, until deposits. This is completely different animal. This is hydrologically resilient because it's so large, because it's basically a big bathtub of water, of the organics, which is controlled by an outlet, which is staying there. No one's going to touch that one. So literally, the watershed is sufficient, you know, apart from us, to continue to provide the hydrology. And believe it or not, precipitation on 10 plus acres of wetland is a lot of water, and so we'll maintain it. So again, I stand by my previous comment that there's not going to be any hydrologic manipulations or changes to this wetland. One thing that I would recommend to the neighbors who are listening to me now, if you have found a box turtle, please document it. And please report it to the Connecticut DEP. This is highly recommended. They have a form. They can go on their website. It's pretty easy to look. So you can make a map, tell where your property is, where you saw it, you know. And if you can actually look at the fact sheet that they have at the Connecticut DEP, it gives you some understanding of the kinds of things you might want to look at. Is it a female? Is it a male? It's easy to distinguish that if you look at a box turtle. You can figure their age. It's very easy to look at that, especially for the younger turtles, because of the annuli that's on the carapace. You know, they have little rings, so you can count them and see how old they are. And that's highly important. And that will give us an idea of, you know, what we're looking at here. So I always recommend that, you know, people do that. I live in Vernon, Connecticut, and I'm in sort of a half acre or a little more subdivision. Wetlands all over the place. We have box turtles. And when I first got there, people would come to me and bring box turtles in boxes. I'm like, what are you doing? And then unfortunately happens often. So I'd have to make sure that they put it back in where they found them. So then they're still there. We see them on occasion. And we have a larger interconnected system. Now, I guess I raised the storm here by using the word trichloplier. So let me explain a couple of things with trichloplier. Yes, I think the good doctor, and thank you for your service, by the way, is correct, that esters are the component of that is the most toxic. But if you look, and I just quickly looked at the USEPA site and a couple of other sites, And yeah, there is toxicity that's associated with it, but it has to be in very high concentrations for aquatic life and wildlife. The average half-life of this particular compound is between half a day and 7.5 days, which means 50% of it in that period completely disintegrates. And this is used by the U.S. Forest Service, is used by the DEP. The DEP actually recommends the use of triclopyr for getting rid of invasives. It's part of the protocol that they use. So if you have a professional who knows how to use it exactly, there shouldn't be any problem at all.
One quick question. And if the commission felt uncomfortable with the use of that, which was a recommendation, we're happy to just have
Mechanical.
Just to have mechanical removal.
We could do that.
No need for chemicals. I think George thought it was a good way to handle it, but if it gives you any cause for concern, the invasive will be moved by hand or mechanically, and that's it. So you don't have to worry.
And that has been done in many other sites that I've been involved to. So that's more or less what I have to say. So I stand behind
George,
what I've
for
said.
the record, do you see any negative impact that this development will cause as it's been designed on the wetlands or the surrounding property?
With the recommendations that I have made, and as a professional wetland scientist, it is my contention that this will not have an adverse or significant impact on the wetland resources, either its hydrology, its chemistry, or of course we don't have any direct impact whatsoever, or even during the construction phase.
In summary, we would respectfully request an approval of this application. We believe we've taken all the safeguards necessary to protect the wetlands. Once again, I said we're not filling, we're not touching, we're not crossing, we're not permanently or temporarily disturbing the wetlands. We believe we've satisfied all of the conditions for approval that you would see under the Connecticut General Statutes. We believe we are establishing probably the largest buffer that will ever be presented before you for another application by agreeing to provide a conservation easement over all the remaining land outside of the limits of disturbance. With that, I believe it's an additional protection, even though you have somebody would have to come before you. We would also agree to monument, however you like, either by way of split rail fence, limits of disturbance to make sure that it would be clear if there were a violation that no one would touch those wetlands. I feel the frustration of the community. I feel it everywhere. Fairfield County has got a development arm going. There are apartments going everywhere. But this is the right place for it. You're replacing what would have been a 120,000 square foot office building that had actually more impervious with an apartment building that's consistent with the mixed use environment that the town is trying to create. And in doing all of that, we're reducing the impervious of what has been previously approved and have less than 20% impervious on an entire 35 acres. I mean, think about that. And 8%, I think it's 8% of building coverage. So this is not, I understand, I feel for the community, but this is not, this project is not something that should be the source of anyone's anger. This project's gone above and beyond to make sure the wetlands are protected forever, and will have no negative impact on any adjoining properties. And I thank you for your time and appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to thank you all for your participation, and we're going to close this public hearing. Yes, Mr. Waite.
There's been an awful lot said here tonight about this area. Can you give our friends and residents any kind of guarantee that they're not going to be impacted by any water runoff, by any blasting? But a guarantee is a very big word. I understand that, but
let's talk
it's
about
for them.
Yeah, let's talk about the process. Let's talk about the process. Excuse me. Let's talk about the process. Any blasting has to have a pre-blast survey done on any neighboring property. There has to be insurance presented, and it has to be done strictly in accordance with the fire marshal. This is totally within the town's control. They have to provide evidence of a certificate if should there be a single crack that's discovered from the pre-blast survey, and then afterwards, that has to be taken care of and addressed through insurance. So there's your guarantee with regard to blasting. What's that? Well, providing, look, I understand that, but providing a future of almost 19 acres of undeveloped property that won't be invaded again, and a conservation easement over that, they don't have to worry about coming back here again, reducing the amount of impervious over applications that have been previously approved, and then having what we think, one of the most highly regarded soil scientists and ecologists discuss the plans, and on top of that, everything's been engineered. All the stormwater has to be reviewed by your town engineer and approved by your town engineer. And then when you look at where the homes are. This is not Big Y, which sits right against these homes. Our project is behind the Big Y, buffered by a large outcropping of ledge, and then about 19 acres of undeveloped property. And if you looked at George's last page, one of the biggest parts of overdevelopment is the neighborhood was developed almost entirely within the watershed. We don't have anywhere near the development in the watershed that the residents have. That's probably the core of the problem.
You're talking 100.
What's that?
Apartments, though, right? You're talking 100 apartments.
Outside of the wetlands.
Yes.
And it's controlled and built with. See, what's happened when these neighborhoods were developed, you didn't have the stormwater systems that you have. You didn't have the controls built in now. Whether this is an office building or an apartment building, it's irrelevant as to wetlands as long as we can ensure that the water's properly controlled, the water's properly cleaned, and the lack of disturbance within that area.
I believe you'll do that.
What's that?
I believe the water will be controlled.
That's what we're trying, exactly.
But I think these people are concerned about the wildlife, the 100 apartments going in, the cars going in and out. What kind of wildlife's going to live there after that? I think this is what they're saying.
I understand that, and I sense their frustration, but I don't know of another project that leaves 20 acres vacant for the wildlife.
I don't know.
And protected forever. I mean, you're talking about a very, very extremely large and a sensitive development. I don't know of another 35-acre parcel that has 12%, what did I say, 18%, I think it was, impervious and 8% building coverage. This is a very well-designed, well-protected, and hey, if we were pushing it in toward the wetlands to make it more attractive for our residents, that's one thing. We're up against the Big Y. And what planning and zoning liked about it was that, somebody can live there and walk. Somebody can live there and walk to the senior center. They can walk to their shopping. They've got shopping across the street. All the traffic stuff will be handled by zoning and traffic engineers. Right. And as I said, I tried to alleviate you and show you what we also proposed was another outlet out on Armory Drive. But with regard to the wetlands, I think what we've proven tonight through experts, not just assumptions and allegations, that the wetlands will be protected, they'll be protected in the future, and that this project certainly is not an overdevelopment of the acreage that currently exists. From a wetlands perspective, you may have an issue with traffic. That I'm going to have to deal with another board. If you could have an issue with the height of a building, that's another board. But from a wetlands perspective, we believe we've given you all the empirical data that you need to prove, and certainly we've presented a case that this will not have a negative impact on the wetlands, and that this application deserves an approval. There's a whole nother source of issues that I have to deal with down the line. But that's a lot different than here. And I appreciate your concerns. I'm not minimizing. But you asked me to address them, and I thought I had to.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. I'm talking to the commissioners. Go ahead.
I'm looking at the table of the required existing and proposed.
Yeah.
I guess I'm a little confused. So the existing.
You're looking at the upper corner?
Yeah, the upper right, the minimum lot size. So the existing is just under 34 acres?
Yeah, so Commissioner, remember, this is one parcel.
Okay.
This is what we're dealing with.
I see.
The whole thing tonight.
Got it, okay.
Although technically, this is the portion that we're asking for addition and could be treated separately for ownership purposes.
Okay.
But for zoning and other purposes, we're
That's fine.
dealing with the 35 acre
So that's, okay, but here it says 33.998?
Send the public hearing.
It says 33.998.
Yes.
So 34 acres?
Yes.
Okay, and the housing is going to be 730 feet in width by 855 feet in depth? Is that right?
No, that's the whole parcel. Including the parcel. Minimum lot width, there's a minimum lot width. See, typically what happens, this would be a lot easier to see in not a campus-like setting.
Right.
But this deals with the entire, every one of those statistics deal with the entire 34 acres.
Okay.
So the lot has a width of up to 750, whatever.
730 feet by 855 feet?
Correct. But that's, you know what I mean? That's not
That's
not just this.
That's not just that, okay, okay. Setbacks, okay, and then it says the building coverage, to your point, residential zoning, you have up to 25 now in Stratford. The existing is 6.03?
Correct.
Is that top left? And after you construct the new parking, is that counted as, no, it's only building coverage, or does that count parking?
There's building is one thing with buildings, then there's impervious.
Impervious, okay, well, oh, okay, I get it, you're right. So the building coverage addition will only be 2.01% more?
Correct.
Okay. And then the impervious area maximum currently is 12.7.
Correct.
And it's going to go up by 7.1, right, to 19.8%.
Correct. And what's impressive about that is you're under the regs, you're allowed to go up to 50%.
I see that, correct, okay. So if I were to take 730 times 855, what does that represent?
It's total acreage.
No, it's not.
You really can't do that because because of the jogs in the
Right.
property. It's not a square.
How did you get to how did you get to the 8% and the 19.8?
We took the total amount of square footage, which is calculable, not necessarily in width times length.
Right.
But in plotting out the total area.
Okay.
Then divided by whatever the building coverage would be, comes up with your percentage.
But that's not the 730 times 855.
No, because
Okay.
it's not a square.
If it was a square lot, it would be, but it's not.
Right. Correct.
Okay.
Or a rectangular lot, I should say.
It's not meant to be deceiving, but they ask for a width and they ask for the length.
Okay.
You gotta take the width and you gotta take the length. But it's not a simple.
I see.
X
It's,
times Y equals Z.
okay, I see. Okay. The 110,000 square feet of the apartment, that's bird's eye view?
Keep in mind, the 110,000 is not one story.
Right. So it's
can
not bird's eye view.
Correct. You're
Okay.
talking about 4 stories, so you're talking about only adding
see.
30,000 feet against
Okay.
all the square footage.
Okay. I won't question the math any further. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm good.
Okay. Everybody? All right, so I'm going to bring this public hearing to a close at 9:58.
Chairman, can I do one thing I want to make?
Sure.
I'm going to leave this for the record because I don't think with regard to the conservation easement we proposed, at least I've marked
Right.
it on here. And you can hold it, maybe I'll leave it with the office so that this
Right.
way it's actually submitted. Because you can't impose it on me, but I can offer it and we're offering it and actually
And-
drawing it out.
We may have more questions and comments after our next meeting, and we'll get back to you with anything like that.
If you're going to close the public hearing,
Staff may have,
right, but the commission's not going to have another opportunity to
no.
ask questions. So if you wanted to say impose a conservation easement, which he's agreed to, then you could say the terms of which would be discussed with the
Exactly.
attorney or things like that.
And I'll leave in accordance with the map, which I'll leave with you tonight. I'll leave with the town attorney.
Okay? All right.
We have to, we need a motion.
Do we need a motion to close and a motion to adjourn?
Close to
Need a-
adjourn. I think
Pardon?
both, yeah. Yeah, close the public hearing and to
Yeah.
adjourn.
So I need a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Need a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thank you all.